Ottawa.
Local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
This is Thursday, the 15th of July. Good morning. I'm Jason White. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it is partly cloudy and 22 degrees. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. With the next stage of Ontario's COVID-19 reopening tomorrow, Ottawa health officials say we can't forget about public health measures and the possibility of a fourth wave of COVID-19 fueled by the Delta variant. City News reporter Eric O'Brien has more.
Ottawa's Associate Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Brent Malotny, says despite warnings of a potential Delta variant-fueled resurgence, what's important to remember is that what we're doing right now in the city is working.
The actions people continue to take, wearing masks indoors and in crowded places, practicing physical distancing, limiting close contacts, and getting 2 doses of COVID-19 vaccine are enabling us to keep COVID-19 levels at bay. Each day we are moving one step closer toward community immunity. Let's stay the course, Ottawa.
Dr. Malotny says as we head into step 3, public health officials will be keeping a very close eye on the Delta variant and how it spreads. He says we need to be cautious to be able to stay ahead of the virus to not see a resurgence in the fall. Eric O'Brien, City News.
City News time 9:01. The Tecumloops Secwepemc First Nation is to live stream a report today on the 215 unmarked graves found at the former Kamloops residential school property. The presentation will include a briefing on the use of ground-penetrating radar, an explanation of the next steps, and statements from school survivors. Since the community announced the discovery of the unmarked graves 2 months ago, 2 other First Nations, one near Vancouver Island, one in Saskatchewan, have made similar finds. Nova Scotia has recorded its first tornado in more than 20 years. The twister ripped through Stewiacke, north of Halifax, a couple of weeks ago, destroyed a barn and caused damage to some other buildings and trees. The Northern Tornadoes Project investigated the storm and now confirms the tornado caused EF1 level damage. The last tornado in Nova Scotia was in 1999. The first female commander of the Royal Military College of Canada has no immediate plans for radical changes as she takes on her new role. She says the college will play a part in changing the military's culture to address sexual misconduct in the ranks. But Commodore Josie Kurtz notes the RMC has also successfully produced generations of military officers for this country.
So we do a good job of producing not just military leaders, but the people who become also great Canadian leaders in Canadian society. So there isn't a need for radical changes as I can see right now.
Kurtz took over as commandant of the 145-year-old military college in Kingston last week as the Canadian Armed Forces deals with allegations of sexual misconduct involving top officers. Many of those officers graduated from the RMC, prompting questions about the role it has played in creating the conditions for the scandal. German Chancellor Angela Merkel will carry a bag full of issues to discuss with U.S. President Joe Biden today when she arrives at the White House. What is expected to be Merkel's last official visit before retiring from politics comes with an overarching message for Berlin's closest ally. You've got a friend. The veteran leaders are expected to discuss the coronavirus pandemic, the rise of China, and a Russian gas pipeline that Washington opposes. City News time 9:03. Time now for a look at our forecast. Here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Showers and thunderstorms in the forecast for us today, but not until after about 4 or 5, and especially through the evening. Our guaranteed high today, 30 degrees, will feel like 37, 19 for the low. For tomorrow, cloudy, showers, isolated thunderstorms, high 27 will feel like 36. For the weekend, cloudy Saturday near 27, feeling like 33, and then we could get some showers Sunday. For today, the high near 30.
Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, partly cloudy, 21 degrees, the humidex 28. I'm Jason White. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's got the news and the views.
He's got views on the news.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's a great looking day out there. A little on the sticky side. This kind of weather, you know what it is perfect for growing corn. So think about our farmers, okay? Knee-high by July, right? The corn is supposed to be knee-high by July. Good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. We have a great program lined up for you this morning. Never a dull moment. Andrea Horwath is going to join us in about 10 minutes from now. She's the leader of the official opposition here in Ontario. And get all the latest news and developments about COVID-19 from her point of view. Vaccination program, vaccine passports. That's been a hot issue over the last couple of days on this show. Step 3, tomorrow, grand reopening. We move into step 3. We'll get the political take on it all. Kind of a theme for us today, because every Thursday morning we host a panel discussion, and it just happens to be called Ontario Politics This Week. So Lindsay Maskell and Andrew Brander will both be back with us. Lindsay is more of the liberal persuasion. She used to work for Dalton McGuinty, after all, while Andrew is more on the right side of things. It's always a lot of fun. That's coming up right after the 9:30 news. In addition to all the talk about the pandemic and vaccines and vaccine passports and step 3, another big issue to pay attention to, I think, is going to be childcare. You see, Prime Minister Trudeau is making his way across the country in anticipation of an election announcement. And he has managed to score a pair of deals with a pair of premiers. They're in on his plan to offer parents childcare that costs no more than $10 a day. He announced as much with the Nova Scotia Premier the other day, and he made a similar announcement with the BC Premier, John Horgan, a New Democrat. So what will Doug Ford do when the pitch from Trudeau is made to Doug Ford, assuming it's made to Doug Ford? This whole $10 a day childcare program is supposed to be cost shared, okay, 50-50 between the provinces and the federal government. But is it a program that Premier Ford is even interested in being part of? Or would his government prefer to do its own thing and stick to whatever it's doing now? It'll be very interesting to see how that issue plays out over the course of a federal election campaign in battleground Ontario. And some people are predicting, here it is, July 15th, the campaign could begin, the federal campaign could begin a month from today, with Election Day being September 20th. That's the latest buzz. As well this morning, The World. It's a new segment we call The World with Elliot Tepper. Elliot used to be part of the Mark Sutcliffe show. He's part of our show now every week. Longtime international affairs professor at Carleton University. He was my international affairs professor at Carleton University. As a matter of fact, I didn't do too well. And look at us now. But it's a complicated world. Okay, there's a lot to cover. We're going to talk about the situation in Haiti with the assassination of that country's president, and what the Canadian government should be doing to help, not the Haitian government, but the Haitian people, okay? Haiti is Canada's largest recipient of foreign aid. There is a significant Haitian-Canadian population in Canada. Numbers about 170,000 people or so. And $1.5 billion Canadian dollars in foreign aid has flowed into Haiti in the last decade, since the earthquake devastated that country. But here we are, 2021. Public institutions in Haiti are failing, corruption running rampant, and people are destitute and going without. So we're going to get into that. We'll also get into the situation in Cuba, where things are not much better post-Castro. And what's next for Afghanistan now that the Americans are out of there? And is the Canadian government doing enough to help the Afghans who helped the Canadians while they were serving in Afghanistan? So much to get into. That's at 11:30 this morning. Now, for the Talkback Hour. We do the Talkback Hour every morning during the Rob Snow Show. We do it between 10 and 11 o'clock. We do an hour of opinions, an hour of phone calls. Okay? 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. That's our call-in line. We're not doing vaccine passports today. Consequences for the unvaccinated. We did that for 3 solid days. I don't know if there's much more that needs to be said on that. Okay? And frankly, I'm kind of talked out on it, to tell you the truth. Okay? Last week, we started doing something new that we call 3 election questions. We did it last week. The discussion was terrific. So this is something we want to do every Thursday between now and Election Day. 3 election questions. And I mean, it's easy enough. We're not reinventing the wheel around here. I have 3 questions. And they're about issues that will likely come up over the course of the federal election campaign. In fact, all 3 of them today are in the news. You think last week we talked about a basic income guarantee? If we're going to get rid of the CERB, should we keep a basic income guarantee? We talked about getting Alberta oil to Atlantic Canada and all points in between via something called an Energy East pipeline. A lot of people were in favor of that. And we talked about decriminalizing illegal drugs, making drug addiction more of a public health issue instead of an issue for the courts, the criminal courts. Not a lot of takers on that last week, I have to say. But 3 more questions this morning, 3 more potential election issues, okay? Childcare, taxing the rich, and buying new fighter jets. Okay? 3 election questions. So question number 1 is, do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea for the federal government to offer parents government-run childcare that costs parents no more than $10 a day? Justin Trudeau is out on the pre-election hustings promising that right now. Not only promising it, he can say we're actually in the process of doing it because he has inked these early agreements with Nova Scotia and British Columbia. But $10 a day, childcare, is part of, well, a big part of the Liberal re-election campaign. But should we be doing it at all? I want to know where you stand on that one. Okay, that's question number 1. Question number 2. Should the wealthy pay more tax? The NDP is promising that. Jagmeet Singh, the NDP leader, made that perfectly clear yesterday during an announcement in Windsor. In fact, David has some audio for us that he's going to play right now. Mr. Singh, the NDP leader, we're going after the rich.
In fact, the wealthiest 44 billionaires in Canada increased their wealth by over $70 billion in this pandemic. So when it comes to how we pay for the recovery, how we pay for the pandemic, the Democrats believe we need to ask the ultra-rich to pay their fair share. And the reason why I say fair share is because the ultra-rich have often hidden their money using offshore tax havens and loopholes. So we are going to ask the ultra-rich to pay their fair share. We believe in an ongoing tax. We're going to propose a number of measures.
Okay. Jagmeet Singh, yesterday, Windsor, Ontario. So the NDP is promising if it forms government, the wealthy will pay a lot more tax. The NDP is talking about, and you have to pay attention to the language, the NDP is talking about taxing wealth, not taxing income in a different way, taxing wealth. Taxing wealth is different than taxing income. Okay, big difference there. But should the wealthy pay more in tax? That's question number 2. And this is also in the news today. David Pugliese, National Defense Correspondent, Ottawa Citizen, with the story. So it frames question number 3 quite nicely. Should Canada cancel plans to spend billions of dollars on new fighter jets for the Royal Canadian Air Force? We have a letter to the Prime Minister signed by a group of actors and singers and writers and activists. And they say fighter jets are useless and we should scrap plans to buy them and we should instead spend those billions of dollars on more progressive things like poetry, for example. What do you think? What do you think? Should we cancel plans to buy a fleet of new fighter jets? Those are today's 3 election questions. Give them some thought. Share your answers and opinions during the Talkback Hour on the Rob Snow Show between 10 and 11 o'clock. Again, the call-in line is 750-1310. Andrea Horwath, the leader of Ontario's New Democrats, joins me next here on City News.
Well, we're celebrating our 43rd year. It's still family operated. We're in our second generation. We, pre-COVID, we're at about 1,000 employees. We have 20 stores from coast to coast in Canada. We do our own manufacturing. Right here in Ottawa, we have about 160 people that support Canadian-made manufacturing in addition to our retail stores. Taking you back to mid-March and the impact of the pandemic on Lee Valley. Lee Valley was actually in a tough spot. We had just launched our website a few months prior to that, and we were going through, a fairly typical deployment dive where your customers retract as they adjust to the website. And then under stress already, this pandemic hit. And in the early days, it was pretty critical. It hit us really hard. Stores were closed. We weren't sure what to do, so we had to go right into survival mode. As a result, we had to take our workforce almost back to half of where we were at because the stores were closed, and with 20 stores, that's a big retail workforce. But what we were able to do pretty quickly, with a little luck, being essential, selling tools and hardware, we were able to adjust our business model, with respect to the stores and our fulfillment operation. That new website that we were under stress worked out well for us because as the world was under house arrest, people were looking to online, and the conversion to our online sales in some cases almost doubled. And we saw tremendous interest in things to do at home. Where we were lucky once again and fortunate is that our product offering. Work at home tools, craft, hobbies, backyard, container gardening, you name it. What we sold was really appealing to people. With respect to our stores, Lee Valley, a rare unknown fact was that we were one of the pioneers of curbside pickup. We've been doing it for 25 years. Pretty much dove right into the application to help with the contactless shopping right away. We took the application, and it's not like a Apple application where you have to download it to your phone and clutter up your phone. This is literally resides right on our website. So you walk into our store with your phone, you pull up our website, and there's a little scan icon. You just tap that, select your store, off you go. You go through the showroom, you scan product, you can read more about it, you can check the on hand, you can add it to your cart, continue to shop, and when you're ready, you just submit it to the counter. We'll go pick it for you. We'll call out your name, we'll check you out, send you on your way. You haven't touched anything. It's completely safe, and it's using a device you're comfortable with and a website that you're familiar with. Amazingly, 9 out of 10 people that used it loved it and want to use it again.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Well, there's so much to discuss this morning with the leader of the official opposition here in Ontario, the leader of Ontario's New Democrats, Andrea Horwath. She is in lovely Guelph, Ontario this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Very nice to hear from you.
It's always my pleasure.
The province moves into step 3 of the reopening tomorrow. What do you think about that?
I think people are very excited. I think that people have worked very hard to get us through this third wave that Doug Ford walked us into by not paying attention to the advice of the top advisors, the science table, and they've struggled. I'm concerned still around the small businesses that are struggling. That's why we've asked the government for a reopen, stay open plan that provides another round of financial supports, because we know that businesses, although they're opening more, they're still restricted in terms of their numbers of customers and clients, and so we just really want to see these businesses make it through, and there's still a bit of a distance to go. So that's what we've been asking Doug Ford to do. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We're not getting that kind of support coming from the government. So I know that communities and that residents of cities and towns all over this province support their small businesses, and I'm certainly hopeful that they're going to get out there starting tomorrow and frequent their businesses, because we know particularly, Main Street, places where there's, vibrant commercial activity really does identify, what communities are all about, and it helps people, connect to each other on Main Street while they're shopping at their local businesses. So I'm just, I know everybody's excited. I'm hopeful that our businesses will get through this, and I'm very grateful to Ontarians for all the hard work they've done.
Okay. So when it comes to, say, a stay open plan, what should be part of a stay open plan?
Well, a stay open plan, there are a number of things. So, for example, we asked the government for another round of small business support grants that is improved on the last iteration, that actually allows all businesses to qualify, and that creates a better flow of application approvals and funding. We still are hearing that the last set of grants, in some cases, haven't even been received as yet. So that needs to be fixed. We also, know that there are some businesses that are particularly hard hit. We know that Black-owned businesses, for example, need some special attention. We know that the personal service industries, for example, need some extra help, and they're particularly also going to be restricted from their normal number of clients in the shops at any particular time. So estheticians, hair salons, and those kinds of things. And they'll also need to be spending money on PPE, on making sure clients and customers have masks, and that distancing remains. In some cases, plexiglass needs to be still installed. And so, businesses could really be helped by a bit of a hand up in terms of some of these needs.
Okay. I want to ask you about a issue that's been very hot here on our radio show all week, and that's vaccine passports. The Ford government has said it really is not interested in vaccine passports. Mr. Trudeau has said he's not really interested in having some kind of national vaccine passport, more trying to coordinate internationally, but that's a provincial decision. They're going to do it in Quebec. They don't want anything to do with it in some other provinces. What do you think should be done when it comes to having a proof of vaccination in order to, say, go into a store, go into a business, this kind of stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really particularly frustrating for businesses right now, because our government is scrambling. There doesn't seem to be any direction, any guidance, any recommendations, and so that creates its own problems, particularly for businesses trying to decide what to do. And it could actually turn out to be a pretty big mess where really, depending on the business, it's this, that, or the other in terms of requirements. And so having every business design something for themselves with no provincial guidance whatsoever, it's going to be pretty messy. And so, as I said, Ontarians have done a great job in vaccinating themselves and their loved ones, and trying to get to vulnerable neighbors and family members their vaccines. But small businesses are kind of being hung out there to kind of protect themselves and their staff and the public, with really not very much help from the government. So. What I'd like to see is some guidance on what's allowed, some support to help those businesses, as I've already mentioned. It shouldn't be just a free-for-all that everybody has to decide on their own.
Okay. What do you think right now? I mean, the situation looks, markedly improved from where it was. What do you think right now are the biggest risks when it comes to COVID-19 in Ontario? What are the biggest risks right now? I mean, everybody's kind of joyous. They're getting vaccines. Stuff is opening up again. But we are told to be, be wary, be cautious. What do you think the big risks are right now?
Well, I mean, I think that there seems to be some concern that still lingers around the Delta variant and perhaps other variants, showing up. I think that there's still concern that there are particular populations that are vulnerable when it comes to a surge, particularly young people, for example. I know that there are still folks who have barriers to obtaining their vaccinations. I think it's really clear that we still have workers in some particular workplaces or industries or sectors that haven't received their vaccines, that are still worried about losing time at work if they happen to have a bad reaction, for example. Some people still are in a situation where they're juggling a couple of different jobs, and so finding the time to go out and get that vaccine is still a barrier for some. And I think we need, and there's some people that are still physically, literally unable to leave their own dwelling to be able to get a vaccine. And these are some of those, specific barriers or specific challenges that I don't think the government has really, taken on in terms of getting those folks vaccinated.
Okay, one more thing. I'm sure you've heard the rumors there might be a federal election. Have you heard those rumors? There might be a federal election.
Yeah, I've heard something about that.
Yeah, I heard something about that. So the Prime Minister has his own pitch to Canadians ahead of the election, $10 a day childcare. He has this agreement in principle with the province of Nova Scotia that was announced this week, as well the province of British Columbia. So one would assume there's going to come a time where Premier Ford or someone would have to make a decision. Do I want to cost share with the federal government $10 a day childcare program? What do you think should happen there?
We've already urged the the Ford government to take this offer on and to start providing affordable childcare in Ontario. Ontario has the highest cost childcare, the most expensive childcare in the entire country. In some communities, the childcare is more than a mortgage payment for families that have either really small children, infant care, or if they have more than one child in childcare, it can be extremely, extremely expensive. And coming out of COVID-19, we know that women have carried a lot of the burden in terms of job loss. And one of the ways to make sure we have that she-covery is making sure that affordable, accessible, licensed childcare is available for families and for women, so that they can get back into the workforce and help fuel the economic recovery. So for all of those reasons, we've urged Doug Ford to sign on to this opportunity. Certainly, if I was the Premier of the province today, I would be not hesitating at all to sign on to that opportunity.
Okay. Thank you, Andrea Horwath. Continued good health. I appreciate your time this morning.
My pleasure, and same to you, Rob. Thanks so much. Take care.
on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
This is Thursday, the 15th of July. Good morning, I'm Jason White. Right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, clouding over 23 degrees, the humidex 31. Here's what's making news this hour. An arrest in a gunpoint carjacking in Smiths Falls early yesterday morning. The driver had pulled over to check his phone at Beckwith and William Streets in Smiths Falls around 2 a.m. yesterday when a man with a gun hopped in the passenger seat and the driver fled. Police chased the then stolen car through Ottawa and into Gatineau before losing sight. Police say the suspect is now in the custody of Lanark OPP. Ottawa's health officials warn don't let your guard down when it comes to COVID-19. Stage 3 of Ontario's reopening begins tomorrow, but local medical officers worry about us forgetting to take precautions. Shots in the dorms, but not the kind you might remember. The University of Ottawa is making COVID-19 vaccinations mandatory for students who live on campus. It's the first local post-secondary institution to require vaccination. An early morning fire damages a home in Orleans. Smoke filling the basement of the home on Omer Lacasse Avenue around 4:30 this morning. Firefighters extinguished the fire in about 15 minutes. It appears to have been contained to the basement. A fire investigators now got to try to figure out the cause. City News Time, 9:31. I'm Jason White. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
And it's time for Ontario Politics this week. Welcoming back Lindsay Maskell, Liberal strategist, former advisor to Premier McGuinty. Good morning, Lindsay.
Good morning, Rob.
And senior consultant with Crestview Strategy, former advisor to the Ford government, Andrew Brander. Good morning.
Hey there, Rob.
It's great to hear from you. Moving to step 3. Still in step 2, but the hours are counting down. The province moves into step 3 tomorrow, a week earlier than planned. Now, there's still going to be some restrictions in place. Number of people who can be in stores and this sort of thing. But some provinces and countries move faster than others did. Some people think Premier Ford was really tough on the so-called little guy, not so tough on the big box stores. And there's a major investigative report from the Toronto Star that suggests lobbyists had major influence on the Ford government and were able to carve out special exemptions to the rules like big box stores and the like. But I'll let you read that story for yourselves. But the whole Ford Nation brand, part of that brand is I'm in it for the little guy. Okay? We're here for the little guy. So when it comes to moving into stage 3, when you think about the last 16 months and lockdowns and the restrictions, do you think the Premier has done damage to that aspect of his brand? I'm in it for the little guy. What do you think, Lindsay Maskell?
Yeah, it was particularly evident with the reopening of seeing what had the effects on the little guy. So going back into a mall and seeing all the little independent stores that closed, right? So we're in malls where there are independent stores, the number of vacancies there now. The number of vacancies on our main streets of, even in neighborhoods in Toronto, lots of small businesses closed. My heart was breaking seeing, I remember the first 4 days after reopening, driving back late at night, seeing, a nail salon still opening, just hustling because they've been closed for 7 months. So those people will feel the impacts for more than a year, for sure, even with the support. They're going to be seriously feeling the impact. And then a lot of Canadians and a lot of people in Ontario would walk in, use those services, and be reminded of all the health and safety measures those businesses took to be, to be safe and to make it safe for their customers. And we'll think, why are they the ones that had to suffer when, 700 people could fit into my local Walmart? So I definitely think it's a hit, and it's going to be a financial hit for them for a long time, and people will continue to talk about that.
And they'll be looking for someone to blame.
Yes.
Right. I took calls during lockdowns. I probably still get calls today if I ask for them. Business owners who you would think would be right in the wheelhouse of the Ford Nation, politically speaking, who really feel betrayed by him and the way he managed the lockdown. free-for-all at Costco, but not so much for the small independent retailers. So we'll see. But I'd like to know what you think, Andrew Brander. I'm in it for the little guy. That part of the Ford Nation brand. How has that been damaged, do you think?
Yeah, I'd agree with a lot of what Lindsay said here, and it seems, at least in this iteration of moving to stage 3, only 18 months too late, but the province has largely got it right, and you'll notice in the last iteration of the reopening guidelines, and as we get more towards better capacity in these places, it's about distance, and that I think we finally figured that out. So I think there's going to be a lot of people looking at the measures that we've gone through over the past months, and really asking those tough questions in terms of why they were necessary. But more than to your specific question, more than this being about the little guy, let's remind your listeners that the Premier promised to be for the people, we've heard the Premier stand at the podium proudly pronouncing how Ontario has had the strictest, longest lockdown in North America. And I think this is where we see that those populism elements of the Premier, because while that's something that would be horrifying for a lot of Conservatives to hear, he stands so at the podium and says so proudly, because he's got some polling or some numbers that obviously indicates that that's what people wanted to hear at that time. Now, that language has certainly softened in recent months as polls have changed. But this phased rollout, in terms of it being part of the plan, the small shift in dates, in terms of opening a little bit sooner, is all to project the progress that we've made through these sacrifices. So I think part of this can certainly be chalked up to a global pandemic that none of us knew how to deal with, but there also needs to be some acknowledgement of things that we didn't get quite right from the start of this.
Okay.
Rob, I would just
One thing I think is
going to be really shocking and be an interesting topic after reopening, the health hit. As with,
the what? Sorry?
So happy to get to see gyms and fitness places reopening, and it's going to be so interesting to see people's realization of, you've been in panic, with this crisis mode, and you're just getting through it. And when we return to some of these activities, I think it's the first time people are going to be putting a lot of thought into our overall health impact. We've talked a lot about mental health of this, but I think we're about to have a bit of a wake-up call about what this did to all of our physical health by also the way this lockdown was handled. And that affects both small businesses, but everyday people. Yeah.
I don't know if either of you have had a chance to look at this Toronto Star investigative piece this morning. I don't know how long they've been working on this. It's dropped now. If you are going on vacation and are looking for something to read, maybe read this. It might take you that long. It has to be 5,000 words. It's very, very in-depth, okay? But what it suggests is, it's not cash for access, but it certainly speaks to the influence of lobbyists in Ontario. And I'm just going to read you one part of one paragraph. The Toronto Star created a database of all registered lobbying activity at the end of the second wave in Ontario. A Star analysis of that data, as well as interviews with dozens of lobbyists, political, industry, and medical insiders, shows that again and again, during COVID, lobbyists were able to deliver for their clients in industries like film, construction, and long-term care, and in ways that sometimes warped the COVID fight. They pushed for legal indemnities that were provided, contracts that were signed, and lockdown exemptions like the big box carve-out that were granted. Honestly, right from day one, all the way back to last March, I have not understood much of the logic of the rules. Furness said, I wondered, he added, who was pulling the strings. And I believe that's Colin Furness, one of the health experts, right? So he's frequently quoted in the media. So it's infection control epidemiologist, University of Toronto. So, it suggests that it's not the little guy who has Doug Ford's ear, it's the lobbyist who has Doug Ford's ear. Not, I don't know. Is that it necessarily new, Andrew, in politics? Probably not, but it's not part of the Doug Ford brand.
Yeah.
The Doug Ford brand is I'm in it for the little guy, not I'm in it for the lobbyist, right?
It's not part of his brand, you're right. And full disclosure, I mentioned in said article, so I just want to acknowledge that so that I'm not skirting around anything. But I do want to say that the interesting thing about this is that all of these large corporations, and you see this from the investigative piece, which sort of makes it out to be some kind of deep dive investigation where, to be quite honest, it's all this information is on the publicly accessible lobbyist registry. Mm-hmm. So I would say, in terms of like undercover influence or whatever, however the Star tried to spin it, lobbying is certainly an important role for organizations to be able to make sure that their issues are best represented with government. And to be quite honest, most of these organizations would have had an active lobbying presence regardless, because they want to maintain good relationships with the government. So a lot of the results that we've seen in terms of the measures introduced by the government are more indicative of a government that's worked with industry to try and find solutions rather than how the Star likes to portray it as, lobbyists.
Nefarious. See, you're up to something no good or whatever. Right. Okay. Yeah. Any closing thoughts on that, Lindsay? Or
well, I just think this is going to be a bit of a rough road for some of those organizations as it comes out about. Remember that they were both getting, exemptions from the provincial government, but taking large wage and rent subsidies from the federal government. So some of these organizations did extremely well. The rich got richer, the poor got poorer. And the other thing is, my advice always from my time in government, one of the things that I think that around the cabinet table people did best was, how is this going to look? And I loved it when they used the example of, the small business in my hometown and where Walkerton happened, right? And how does this look to those people? Just that who is your customer? And do you think about, it has to be for the greatest good. You really made a mistake if you think you've hit the mark in small town Ontario with this kind of action. So I think there's going to be ramifications to come from it when we see how much as taxpayers we supported these businesses that also got big exceptions. Okay.
Well, I guess one of the things, would any of this activity not be happening if it was another government in power? And that's hard to say. So, I'm sorry, Andrew.
One last thing, Rob.
Sure
I just say, there's a number of companies as well. We just talked about how so many of these organizations have struggled greatly in the last year. The piece obviously fails to mention the number of organizations who advocated for outcomes that they didn't get. And we're talking a lot about those, right? In terms of small businesses and other organizations who have had the toughest time, who have had the toughest restrictions imposed upon them. And quite honestly, I think anyone in that situation would have sought out any kind of help that they could have gotten at that time. So I certainly stand by the work that I do as a professional, But I do think lobbying in general plays a very important role in the information and the education of government.
Okay. Holy cow, the morning is flying by already. 9:45. We have to stop. So when we come back, I want to pick up. We talked about this last week. Actually, Lindsay raised this. Keep an eye on the childcare file. So we have the Prime Minister, widely anticipated to call an election soon, has already inked a pair of early deals here on his $10 a day childcare pledge, one with British Columbia, one with Nova Scotia. What could happen on the Ford front on that? $10 a day childcare for Ontario, for example. Let's get into that when we come back. Ontario politics this week with Andrew Brander, Lindsay Maskell. I'm Rob Snow on City News.
When you've lost your breasts, you've sort of lost part of yourself. And then all at once you're losing your hair. You don't know who you are anymore. You want to feel like yourself again. So I think that the store, a mastectomy store, is essential because you've lost your identity. And then all at once, you're looking for a wig, you need a headscarf, you need a camisole. There's nowhere to go. There's no one to talk to. This should be essential because there are more and more women that are getting breast cancer. I think it's 1 in 6. They're becoming younger. I have a client that's 18 years old. And where do they go? They need a place like this that the women that work there understand. They know what you're going through. It's changed quite a bit. Our hours are different. We're now open from 10 to 5. We're not as busy as we were. A lot of women are afraid to go out. They're afraid that maybe there are more people in the store. So that's why I try and let them know you are alone. There's absolutely nobody in the store except you and I. If there is a woman that she's very afraid, I will lock the door to make sure nobody else comes in. I'll put a sign back in 10, 15 minutes just to give her that reassurance. Before we would have 4, 5, 6 people in the store. We didn't have to turn anybody away. Now we do. Some clients do leave and they're upset because they're in the store. They said, you know, we drove 20 minutes and now we're not allowed in the store. And I try to make them understand that there's somebody in here that's going through chemo or radiation. So that's sort of changed a lot, that we're not able to have more people in the store.
If we're talking about products, there's the bras that are adapted for mastectomy. The bathing suits that are adapted to mastectomy. We have special camisoles as well, and post-surgery bras. And then we have, for women going through chemo, the wigs that we have a big selection in the store as well. We have scarves. Some women don't feel comfortable wearing a wig. They prefer to wear a scarf or a hat, so we have a huge selection of that as well. We offer compression garments as well. When you're going through a mastectomy, you might have lymphedema in your arms after a couple of years, and you have flare-ups. So we have the sleeves, the hand as well that can be covered. We show each other's our scar. We talk about the treatments, how we felt, and I guess that's what they're looking for here. That's what makes us special. We have an added value in this store. Besides everything that's in the store, that's a product that can handle any problem that a client might have. Me and Linda, we've been through. We know how it feels in our bodies.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Ontario politics this week with Andrew Brander, Lindsay Maskell, and I am Rob Snow. So, $10 a day childcare, it's a major part of the Liberal re-election strategy federally, with an election call perhaps coming in as soon as a month, maybe a month from today, some speculate. So, Trudeau has already announced agreements with the BC Premier, Mr. Horgan, a New Democrat, and with the Premier of Nova Scotia, Mr. Rankin. He is a Liberal and is probably going to the polls soon enough as well. How do you think this election will play out in Ontario, Andrew? $10 a day childcare. It has to be cost shared, so there has to be provincial buy-in. Will the Premier of Ontario buy in?
Yeah. First off the top, I think the first two premiers to sign on to this are probably the least surprising.
Okay.
Across the country after a not a decade, decades of talking about this and promising this, I'm really not sure how many people believe the federal Liberals on this commitment anymore. But putting that aside, I think it was a smart move by the feds to put the ultimatum in place, and the Premier in Ontario is going to be caught in a tough spot. If this were to come to fruition with more of the other provinces signing on, it's going to be really hard for the Premier to leave money on the table.
Okay.
But I think fundamentally Conservatives are still going to continue to favor choice of the masses over affordability for a few. The Premier's moved in increasing the childcare tax credit in Ontario in the last year and creating an additional almost 20,000 new childcare spaces in the last sort of year and a half. So I don't see them changing course on that willingly. But again, if enough of the other premiers come to the table, they might be left without a choice.
Okay. All right. What do you think, Lindsay?
Well, first of all, I think parents, despite the fact that we have talked about childcare for a long time, people with families have seen the federal government deliver on that with the childcare benefit and feel that every month in their pocketbook. So there is a lot of credibility there, and it affects people even that don't have children. From a workplace standpoint, the other thing that's important to remember is there is choice. The first phasing in of this, as in 2022, if you had a child in daycare, your costs would be cut by at least 50%. So immediate cost savings to families in the child care of their choice. So the speaking points may not hold up about free choice and you should be able to decide because especially with the fact that there is such a successful model in Quebec. But in the short term, this is an immediate cost savings to families by 2022. So it's going to be a really tough thing to push against. And we know that there's always great to have somebody to push against, but it does put Ford in a hard spot because is he going to help deliver this for parents, or is he in families, or is he going to risk his own candidates who also would think this is actually a fantastic idea?
Okay. Yeah. All right. I think that's one to watch. I really, really do. I really do. I want to talk very quickly. We have about 5 minutes left here. Can mayors have an influence on, say, a provincial election? Now, here in Ottawa, we have Jim Watson, and he's a Liberal. He was a Liberal MPP. He was part of Dalton McGuinty's caucus. Now, he does his best as, a mayor of a big city to try and play it as though he's nonpartisan, get along with everybody, and for the most part, he does a pretty good job, but his political preferences are pretty obvious. I'd like to know a little bit more about the Southern Ontario mayors, like John Tory, like Patrick Brown, like Bonnie Crombie, what way they lean and what kind of influence they could have on a campaign, if any. Andrew, what do you think? Andrew, why don't you take that?
Yeah, I mean they're a unique beast, and they've the mayors have increased their value over the course of the pandemic. Obviously, taking on huge profiles, but again, they're somewhat rogue and unpredictable.
Right.
So I think leaders need to be, and political parties need to be very careful of how they use them. You'll recall in the last election, the one photo op the Prime Minister did with mayors got kind of completely derailed when all of them raised their hand and said that they were in support of a handgun ban. Of course, that's not what the Prime Minister was there to announce. So I think, I I'd expect that a lot of them, and you mentioned three of them, I think we can take Tory out of the equation because, Toronto's a bit less unpredictable when it comes to seats. But Mayor Crombie, Mayor Brown, both of them have former different federal affiliations, but both of them have turned themselves into distinctively nonpartisan representatives of their communities. They know full well that the federal election is going to be won or lost in cities like theirs, in Peel region, and they face elections of their own next year. So they're gonna do whatever is in their best interest. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if we're seeing them throw their weight behind certain policies around affordable housing, around transit, and community safety.
Okay. We have about 2 minutes left. Lindsay, what do you think?
Well, I don't imagine the Conservatives thought about the long game on Patrick Brown when they threw him under the bus.
No.
Because, you really, if there are so many mayors that just were the better politicians in the mix through the pandemic. And if your name's on a ballot, you want to be standing next to your mayor right now for the most part in Southern Ontario. And, it is a problem in the sense that they are going to want to see Patrick Brown become put out his, support of Conservatives. And, he might have to think about whether he's going to go that far or stay neutral. And his force there, especially in the South Asian community, is so strong. Yeah. He and Bonnie has been excellent. I think you're going to see some interesting things with mayors where, this pandemic has made them think they could do a better job. I expect we might see a couple of...
I think a couple are probably going to run for office at some point. Yeah. I mean, the mayor of Edmonton, I guess he's ruled it out. Iveson, I don't know. What's Nenshi going to do? There's lots of speculation. Is he... What's next for him? And not always
necessarily not even necessarily for the Liberals. Like, I think, people are kind of watching what the mayor of Windsor might do, for example. So there's some interesting things in municipalities, and I know that both parties, particularly Brampton and Mississauga, with their respective former federal members, would love to see them be a little more clear about their partisan support. And I think that's going to be a really interesting thing to watch between where Doug Ford now needs Patrick Brown more than he would have expected in 2018.
Yeah, and I just add on that very quickly that Patrick Brown was organizing for Peter MacKay in the leadership race. So right. What impact and role does that have? What politics are at play there? And just because we're throwing out other names, I'd watch Mayor Scarpetti and Markham as well.
All right. Thanks to both of you. Always great to hear from you. We'll talk soon.
Thanks.
Have a great week.
Always interesting. Andrew Brander and Lindsay Maskell. That's Ontario Politics this week. Talkback Hour and 3 election questions on childcare, on taxing the rich, and buying fighter jets. 3 election questions for you right after the news. Hope you'll call at 750-1310 here on City News.
one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
This is Thursday, the 15th of July. Good morning. I'm Jason White. Right now, mostly cloudy, 23 degrees in Ottawa and Smiths Falls. The humidity making it feel like 31. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. As Ontario enters stage 3 of its COVID-19 reopening tomorrow, local health officials urge continued vigilance in order to prevent a fourth wave of the pandemic. City News reporter Eric O'Brien explains.
Associate Medical Officer of Health Dr. Brent Malotny says we're making great progress in keeping COVID-19 cases low here in the city, which is why we're heading into step 3. But when we're in step 3, he says we can't forget about how the virus spreads.
I mean, the pandemic is not over. COVID is still around. COVID has shown itself over the last year and a half to take advantage of opportunities that we provide to it. We've made tremendous progress, and we want to continue to improve that.
Dr. Malotny says the Delta variant is certainly what is the concern for public health officials. He says the actions we're taking right now are working, like keeping our distance, wearing our masks, washing our hands, and getting vaccinated. Eric O'Brien, City News.
City News time 10:02. This is likely going to be a very emotional day for members of BC's Tecumseh First Nation. The band is set to release a report on the findings of a ground-penetrating radar search of the former Kamloops residential school site. That's where they found those unidentified 215 unmarked graves. The First Nation will present the findings of the report and then outline what it plans to do next. School survivors are also expected to speak at the event. An evacuation order has been issued for more than 1,400 properties in BC's Caribou region, warning of immediate danger from forest fires. The district of 100 Mile House, about 200 kilometers north of Kamloops, is on evacuation alert, which means everyone could have to clear out in minutes if the situation deteriorates. Much of central and eastern BC is under a special weather bulletin warning of smoky skies, and the Meteorological Service of Canada says residents should be prepared for smoky skies to linger into the fall. Meantime, an emergency order is now in effect in northwestern Ontario, allowing that region to better respond to growing wildfires there. The province's Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry says the order means that Ontario can close roads and restrict access to certain areas as needed to fight the fires. The provincial government says there are currently more than 70 forest fires burning across northwestern Ontario. From the international desk this morning, Brazil's president has a case of the hiccups. And it's so bad he may be headed for emergency surgery.
Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro was transferred to a Sao Paulo hospital Wednesday afternoon after doctors diagnosed him with an intestinal obstruction while investigating the cause of chronic hiccups that he's been suffering from for more than 10 days. The president's office says Bolsonaro's doing well and is undergoing more medical exams to determine if he needs emergency surgery. The 66-year-old leader has had intestinal complications and multiple surgical procedures since he was stabbed on the campaign trail in 2018. Claire Bauer, ABC News, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil.
City News time 10:03. Time now for a look at the forecast. Here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Sun and cloud for most of the day, and then it's through the evening that we get into the showers and thunderstorms. Some storms could be severe today. The high near 30 degrees, feeling like 37, 19 for the low. Tomorrow, cloudy, showers, isolated thunderstorms. High 27 will feel like 36. For the weekend, could get some showers mainly Sunday, still quite warm and humid. For today, the high near 30.
A mix of sun and cloud across eastern Ontario and West Quebec right now. 23 degrees in Ottawa and Smiths Falls with a humidex of 31. I'm Jason White. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
3 election questions. Question number 1. Do you think a $10 a day childcare program is the right thing or the wrong thing to do for Canada? What do you think? For Canadian parents, do you think $10 a day childcare is that the right thing or the wrong thing to do for Canadian parents? Okay, that's question number 1. Question number 2. For 3 election questions for this week, 750-1310. Should the wealthy pay more tax? Should the wealthy pay more tax than they're paying right now? That's an NDP promise in the election campaign. Okay, that's question number 2 for 3 election questions. And question number 3, should the federal government cancel plans to buy new fighter jets for the Royal Canadian Air Force? Just cancel those plans. Be done with it once and for all, okay? And we'll just have an Air Force with no fighter jets. What do you think? Those are this week's 3 election questions. We're hoping to do this every week between now and Election Day. Or probably a month out from the election call, rumor has it. 750-1310, 750-1310, 750-1310. Yeah, we did this last Thursday. We are working from the assumption that there is going to be a federal election campaign and that it's going to be called fairly soon. Last week, we talked about the basic income guarantee. Not a lot of fans of that. We talked about an Energy East pipeline running from northern Alberta down into St. John, New Brunswick, perhaps. There were a lot of takers on that one. And we talked about decriminalizing the possession of all illegal drugs. Not a lot of uptake for that. But this week, as I said, 3 more questions about, and we're doing this because these are issues that are quite likely going to come up during the next election campaign. And in fact, the 3 this morning are, they're in the news to varying degrees. Do you think $10 a day childcare, government-run childcare, okay, $10 a day, parents pay no more than $10 a day, is that the right thing or the wrong thing to do? We've seen Mr. Trudeau already get a couple of agreements in place, one with British Columbia, the other with Nova Scotia. Very interesting. Question number 2, do you think the wealthy need to pay more tax? Okay. Mr. Singh says the rich aren't paying their fair share. We're gonna make sure they pay their fair share. Do you think the rich need to pay their fair share? Are they paying their fair share right now? Do the wealthy need to pay more tax? The NDP's talking this up, going after the super rich, making them pay their fair share. Okay, what do you think about that? And should the federal government scrap its plan to buy new fighter jets? Okay, I'm asking you that because it's in the newspaper this morning. Neil Young, Daryl Hannah. Do you really want Neil Young and Daryl Hannah making national defense policy for Canada? No. Hey, Harvest Moon, I was raised on it, but I don't want Neil Young to be in charge of, military procurement for the Canadian Armed Forces. No thanks. 750-1310, 750-1310. 3 election questions. Should we do this $10 a day childcare thing? Should the rich pay more tax? And should we scrap plans to buy new fighter jets? You betcha they're going to come up during the election campaign, those issues. So let's talk about them now at 750-1310. Gary. Good morning, Gary.
Good morning.
Yeah, very nice to hear from you, sir. Thank you for calling.
Thank you, and same to you. And my opinion, as far as the
childcare, let's start there. $10 a day, no more than $10 a day.
Well, my parents both worked. They didn't have childcare. They dealt with having a child the way it's supposed to be.
Okay.
It's not the government's responsibility to subsidize childcare for working couples.
Okay.
Single mom, or people that are working lower income jobs.
Right. Okay.
That would be different.
Okay.
They're trying to...
So maybe put a means test on it. For example, in Quebec, when Quebec first introduced it, they called it $7 a day childcare. Okay, it was $7 a day, and anybody could get it. Didn't matter if you were earning the minimum wage or you were the CEO of Hydro-Quebec. Everyone paid $7 a day. Then under the Liberal government, they actually changed that, and now it goes on kind of a sliding scale, but it's still very inexpensive. But you think it should be maybe for low-income people, for example?
Yes.
Okay. Right.
I have no problems with the idea of people wanting to improve their how they live and everything. That's part of capitalism, right? But it's not the community's responsibility to fund it.
Okay, I got you on that. You're a no on that. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Should the wealthy pay more tax than they're paying right now?
That's one I have a hard time with because if you worked hard and you're making money because you're profiting by what you're doing, you're already supporting the economy. That aspect of me is no, because...
And, if I could just interrupt, like, let's say you're making a lot of money, okay? You're lucky enough and you're making a lot of money. You're in the highest tax bracket, provincially and federally. You're giving half of your money to the government right off the top. Like 52, 53%, right?
Well, if you're paying your taxes and not using the offshore dives that, we all know about.
Sure.
I think there should be maybe a tax incentive if you want to give more money, something to give you a break for investing in your community. I'll use that term.
Okay.
But,
all right. Okay.
A general tax on the rich, no. I don't
okay. All right. Okay. Fighter jets, I don't know how we're still flying CF-18s now, and we bought used CF-18s, and we don't know what the next fighter jet is going to be. Should we buy them at all? What do you think?
Yes. We have a huge northern border that's not really easily monitored, and air power is about the only thing that's really mobile and portable.
Okay.
I think we should have...
Need some fighter jets. Okay. Thanks, Gary. Thank you. Let's move along. 3 election questions, 750-1310. That's how it works. Theo. Good morning, Theo.
Hi.
Where are you today, Theo? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Centertown.
Oh, Centertown. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
$10 a day childcare. Government-run childcare costs parents no more than $10 a day. Sounds like it's a screaming deal. Are you in favor of that, sir?
Yes, I am.
You are?
Actually.
Okay.
Okay. Because I remember my mother, she was a single mother, and she was independent on paying a babysitter. So if she could have gotten it cheaper, she should have. If it was $10 a day, that would have helped her out financially to pay for stuff like food, clothing, etc.
Yeah. Okay.
I can see more benefits to that than
see some benefits to it.
than anything anybody can knock it with.
Okay. Should the wealthy pay more in tax than they're paying right now? That's an NDP promise. They're going to tax the rich more. They say the rich aren't paying their fair share. What do you think?
Well, I've in some way or other, I've given this a little bit of thought. I was thinking, okay, for it was just like a company as such, like a national, international company, as an example.
Sure.
National company being, for example, Loblaws.
Loblaws, yeah.
At the end of, for, say, fresh food and meat, it has a certain shelf life. They hand that over to shelters and and such, and add that up throughout the tax year, and that amount they get credit for.
Give them a tax credit for it. Okay. All right. Okay. Give them a tax credit if they do good works. And this is similar to what the last gentleman said. If they do good works in the community. I guess kind of like a charitable receipt that you would get from CRA, for example, or something like that. Okay. I understand what you're saying. So.
It doesn't eliminate them paying 100% of the taxes.
Yeah.
It's just there's a certain amount that they don't have to pay financially.
Sure. Okay. What about buying fighter jets for the Navy? It's been a long time since we've had any new fighter jets for our men and women in the Air Force. Long overdue.
I haven't been happy with Canada as far as the expenditure on military hardware for the longest time. I've seen nothing but deterioration as far as that goes.
Okay.
We're not even on the Security Council anymore.
Yeah. On the UN Security Council. Yeah, we don't have a temporary seat. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Theo. Thank you for your input today. It's 3 election questions on a Thursday morning. We're talking childcare, soaking it to the rich, soaking the rich, and should we buy new fighter jets? We have 100 well-known artists and activists saying, don't buy those fighter jets. They're useless. That money can be better spent elsewhere. What do you think? It's the Rob Snow Show on City News.
My name is Pamela Caillou. I'm a local artist. I'm Métis, and the heritage derives from Algonquin and Huron background. That comes from way, way back from the 1600s. I was trained in school classically, like we studied the masters like Picasso, Michelangelo, Van Gogh, and so you'd have to say it's quite different, my style. What I've done is taken the skills that were taught to me by traditional painting and incorporated that with the Indigenous heritage. My art pieces incorporated the energy and spirit of the Mother Earth in pretty much every single one of them, because I want people to realize, even though we might think we are the masters of the domain here on the planet, that is not the case. It's the Mother Earth that's providing a balance and our causes to live and whatnot. And it's just to always see her and remember her and respect her. Well, I try to keep my style different because there are like a handful of Canadian artists that are really well known, like Norval Morrisseau and whatnot, but it's been done. So I kind of want to stay away from the pack, and that's what makes my artwork a little more unique. But at the same time, if you're looking at it, you do know it's Indigenous and you do know it's the woodland style. I usually start by coming up with an idea, which would be, let's say, 4 days. Well, it depends what's inspiring me at the time. It could be a lot of trees, it could be water, it could be the medicine wheel. I would choose a subject and try to really incorporate what it is I want people to see from that. So then from there, I have sketchbooks and I do little sketches of everything because the canvas is expensive. So you don't want to start something and have to throw it away. And then from there, I go on to the bigger piece on the canvas. Once I have on my sketches the direction I want to take my artwork in. I chose a lot of vibrant colors for the pieces because if somebody is willing to make the commitment to have my piece of work in their home, I would actually like them to come home after a long, hard day, and some days aren't so great, to look at something that's very joyful.
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Every Thursday, it's 3 election questions between now and Election Day. Question number 1, $10 a day. Universal childcare, government-run childcare. Is that a good thing, bad thing, right thing, wrong thing? What do you think? Question number 2, should the wealthy pay more tax than they pay now? And question number 3, should we cancel plans to buy a new fleet of fighter jets for the Royal Canadian Air Force? Don't even think about buying the F-35 or any of them. It's an opinion that's out there. I want to know your opinion for this week's 3 election questions at 750-1310 in Cornwall. Carol, good morning. You're on City News.
Good morning.
Yeah, nice to hear from you. On childcare, $10 a day. Is that the right thing or the wrong thing?
With limits, I would say definitely for single moms, single dads, definitely.
Okay.
But then after that, I think we have to start looking at the income of a family.
Put some kind of means test on it, what have you,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's not for everybody. Okay, all right. Question number 2, should the wealthy pay more in tax than they pay right now?
I don't think so. And I'm not saying that from me being wealthy, far from it, but I don't think we should start penalizing people for hard work they've done, made money, no matter how. But maybe perhaps just rein in some of those tax loopholes might fix some of the problems.
Okay. All right. Question number 3, fighter jets. Should we buy new fighter jets?
Most definitely. I think going through this pandemic here in Canada, where we've had to depend on other countries for vaccines, should give us an eye open to this business of depending on other countries for helping us when we need help. I think we should be able to stand on our own 2 feet.
Okay, interesting way to look at it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh my gosh, look who's back. It's Bernie. Still brings a tear to my eye every time I hear it. Good morning, comrade.
How you doing, Rob?
I'm good. All right, 3 election questions for you, Bernie. 3 election questions.
Yeah, okay.
$10 a day childcare. Is that the right thing or the wrong thing to do? Government-run childcare. Let me get.
Good policy, as long as you don't turn to austerity after it gets a majority government, and then say we can't afford it.
Oh, and they can't afford it. Well, he's already signing deals with premiers. So
I know, but
be...
they can change their minds.
Oh, I
remember Paul Martin and Chrétien back in the 80s. They cut everything.
Well, in the 90s, yeah, in the mid-90s, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
Question number 2. Let me guess. Bernie, you old socialist, you. Should the wealthy pay more tax than they do right now?
Yeah, I think probably between 40 and 70% of their money should be taxed.
Well, I mean, if you're in the highest income tax brackets right now, your effective tax rate's 53% right now. The government's already taken half of your money, so...
Well, the thing is for all this deficit spending and everything, I say tax the rich and pay for it.
Take some more. Okay,
Yeah,
all right. Take it till they have nothing left. All right, tax the rich till they're not rich anymore. What about buying fighter jets for the Air Force?
No, I don't think Canada should invest in it. I think we should be looking for a world of peace now and get away from this military complex that's in the whole world.
All right. Thank you, Bernie. Good to hear from you. I'm glad you're well. Thank you, sir. Bye-bye. He cheered for the Soviets against Canada. Okay? In 72. Can you imagine? Cheered for the Soviets. Okay? Against Paul Henderson, scores for Canada. That's how red he is. $10. Every single line is available. It's our 3 election questions, so your wait won't be too long. $10 a day childcare, the promise from the Liberals that's been around. Honest to goodness, it has been around longer than David has been alive. What year were you born, David? Remind us. 98? 97, 98. This was a promise in 93. The Liberals promised this in the Red Book in 93, I believe, so-called universal child care. And the current crop of Liberals, they've trotted this out again. It's kind of like this high-speed rail promise, right? This one is the promise to bring universal government-run child care to a neighborhood near you, and it will cost you no more than $10 a day. It's very much in the style of the Quebec program. And it should not be dismissed out of hand. In Quebec, it's so popular that it is suggested that you sign up before your child is born. If you want a space, that's how popular it is. But it's been a political football. If you think, let me think, back to the mid-2000s, you had a Liberal government, and the minister at the time was Ken Dryden, crisscrossing the country, and he was signing child care agreements with provincial governments at the time for a program kind of like this. And then there was an election. Stephen Harper was philosophically opposed to state-run child care for obvious reasons. He was a small government, small C conservative guy, and he was in favor of choice in child care. But then you had, on television, you had Liberal mouthpiece, Paul Martin loyalist, Scott Reid, put his foot in his mouth with his infamous beer and popcorn remark. And that helped sink the good ship Liberal. Scott Reid said at the time, some of you may remember when he said it at the time, don't send Canadian parents money. What they need is childcare spaces, and if you send them money, they'll only blow it on beer and popcorn. And for enough people, that was all they needed to know about how big government Liberals really felt about ordinary Canadians. You know, government knows best, very nanny state stuff. And then the Harper government came in and it brought in the UCCB, Universal Child Care Benefit. Then by 2015, new kid on the block, Justin Trudeau wasn't talking about universal childcare in the Quebec model anymore. He instead simply promised to increase the monthly allowance for childcare and make it tax-free. And that became the Canada Child Benefit, which is what we have now. It replaced the universal child care benefit. We're getting rid of the universal child care benefit. Welcome to the Canada Child Benefit, right? This has now become a major expense for government. Okay, this is one of the costlier social programs that the federal government runs right now. It's running about $23 billion a year. It's big money. But the case is being made that what Canadians still need, what parents still need, especially given all the difficulties highlighted by the pandemic of trying to balance work life and childcare duties, what parents really need is universal, affordable, regulated childcare, with a big emphasis on affordable. And you have Liberals out there, and they're pitching it to Canadians right now. No more than $10 a day. No more than they say it'll take 5 years to get down to $10 a day, but that's what they say they're going to do. 750-1310. Bob in Ottawa South. Bob.
Good morning.
Yeah, hi, Bob. On $10 a day childcare, what do you think? Good idea, bad idea?
They're dreaming. I mean, it's never worked in Quebec.
What do you mean it's never worked in Quebec?
It was supposed to be universal.
Universal, yeah.
They've made, I've lost track of all the changes they've made. Yes, they have lower cost daycare.
Well, much lower cost,
but it's subject to a lot of
Well, one of the major changes that they brought in was a sliding scale.
Yes.
Because it used to be $7 a day for everyone. Then it went up and it was $10 a day, I think, or $11 a day. $10 maybe. But it goes by income now. It goes by... What's that?
This is a pipe dream.
Well, I don't know if it is a pipe dream. Childcare in Gatineau is about $200 a month. In Ottawa, it's about $1,000 a month. It's a big difference for a Canadian family.
And you just mentioned the number that is paid by the federal government under the child benefit program.
Annually, it's $23 billion a year. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's move along here. Should the wealthy pay more tax?
The wealthy, I just took a look. The federal share of tax for the top 20%. This is just a federal share.
Yeah.
It's 33%.
33%. Just
you add on another 50% for provincial. They're paying 50% of their income.
Right. This is often an argument that is made, though, that not only do the wealthy pay their fair share, they pay more than their fair share. They pay the most. Okay. Right. All right. Should we buy new fighter jets?
I think we have to. I mean, a country like Canada.
Sure.
But they won't make the commitment. I mean, who's interested in the military until the Russians come over the northern border?
Okay. They might be there right now, and we wouldn't even know it, Bob. They could be there right now, Bob, and we wouldn't even know it. Thank you, sir. We're back right after the news. Hang on. Okay. Lauren Yale, Kempville, Calgary. One more line there at 750-1310. 3 election questions for you right after the news. Won't be long at all. Be right back. Rob Snow Show, City News.
One for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
This is Thursday, the 15th of July. Good morning, I'm Jason White. Right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, mostly cloudy, 26 degrees, feeling like 33. Here's what's making news this hour. A man is now under arrest after a gunpoint carjacking in Smiths Falls that led police on a high-speed chase through Ottawa and into Gatineau. A driver had pulled over to check his phone around 2 yesterday morning at Beckwith and William Streets in Smiths Falls. That's when a man with a gun hopped in the passenger seat. The driver fled. The suspect now in the custody of Lanark OPP. 145 new cases of COVID-19 in Ontario today. 10 more people have died. Of today's new case numbers, the province says 3 of them were in Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark. 2 were in the city of Ottawa, 1 in Renfrew County, 0 new cases in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. Updated local numbers will come this afternoon. An update now on yesterday's hazmat call at a Lincoln Fields apartment building. 2 people were taken to hospital after the mixing of pool chemicals formed some noxious gas. It happened around 3:30 yesterday afternoon at the building on Edgeworth Avenue near Carleton. Paramedics tell City News a woman in her 70s and a man in his 80s were taken to hospital in serious but stable condition. The gas from the chemicals did not spread through the building. A sign on a 417 on-ramp that appeared to get its directions wrong has now been fixed. The sign for the eastbound 417 at Pinecrest appeared to point drivers down the westbound on-ramp, while the sign's arrow points up ahead and to the right. Because the sign is next to the other on-ramp, nearby residents decided the sign was wrong. A 150 meters ahead sign has been added to try to clarify the situation. City News Time 10:33. I'm Jason White. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
3 election questions. $10 a day childcare program being picked by Trudeau right now. Is it the right thing or the wrong thing to do? Nationalized childcare program, $10 a day. Okay, wouldn't cost you anything more than $10 a day if you're a parent. Should the wealthy pay more tax? Mr. Singh, the NDP leader, says if the NDP forms government, they're going to tax the rich more. And question number 3, should Canada cancel plans to buy a fleet of new fighter jets for the Air Force, the Royal Canadian Air Force? This week's 3 election questions. Andrew, you're on City News. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning from smoky Calgary.
Yeah, good to hear from you, sir. $10 a day childcare, right thing or wrong thing? Yes or no?
Anybody making under $100,000 combined income? Absolutely yes. If you're making over $100,000, go fly a kite.
Okay, all right, okay. Should the wealthy pay more tax than they pay now?
No. The wealthy should not pay more tax. We should change our damn laws from letting these people hide their money offshores and write off things that should not be written off. So don't make people pay more. Change the damn laws.
Change the darn laws. Okay. Should we cancel plans to buy new fighter jets?
Oh, absolutely, yes. We don't need fighter jets. We have China, Russia. They're going to protect us. They're probably in our backyard right now. I can see them from here.
Right. Okay. I think I smell sarcasm there. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for taking part this morning. Just on the second question of wealth taxes, okay. It's a promise being floated again by the Democrats to the rich pay their fair share. The NDP says no. And it promises that it's going to raise taxes on the wealthiest Canadians. Mr. Singh was talking about this yesterday. But you have to pay attention to the language, okay? I think the language, it's very deliberate and it's very important. They're talking about taxing wealth. Not about taxing income. They're talking about, that's something altogether, okay? Income tax. They're talking about taxing wealth. Wealth and income are not the same thing. Mr. Singh is saying we're going to tax wealth. Okay, not just someone's annual income, but their overall wealth. All of their assets could be taxed. Whatever the investment for portfolios, real estate, I don't know, boats, Ferraris, whatever. And if it's more than $20 million, bam, they're going to hit you. They are going to hit you. Okay. Scott in Kemptville. Good morning. You're on City News. Scott.
Hi, Rob. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
Very well, sir.
Glad to hear it. $10 a day universal child care program, government run. Affordable. Okay. Yeah. Affordable quality child care, sir. What do you think?
I don't agree with that. My wife and I made sacrifices, which we're quite willing to do, and we stayed home and raised our own children. And we're not wealthy people. I think there should be assistance for let's say, single parents that have very little money available, I don't have a problem with that.
All right.
But people that can well afford to take care of their own children, stay home and take care of your children.
Okay. Should the wealthy pay more tax?
Negative. We need tax breaks to get the economy going. The old formula of Mike Harris, Ronald Reagan, Maggie Thatcher, cut the taxes and the economy will boom, and they'll get more money in the coffers.
All right. Should we buy new fighter jets?
Embarrassingly, yes, we must, because we are not really taken seriously anymore. A lot of my buddies that I was in the Army with, they fought in Afghanistan, and we wouldn't have done that without the assistance of the American logistical support, military support. So we can't do anything without someone else's help. We should be able to at least have fighters. I mean, we do have NATO commitments. We have NORAD commitments. And I'm tired of kind of looking like a laggard. We have to pull our weight, and we got to pay some money.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Good to hear from you from Kempville to Lorignal. Nicola, good morning. Do we have Nicola there? I don't hear her. Do you hear her? Do we have her on? Is she on? No? She's usually there. Want to try again? Nicola? Okay. I have to go there. People are waiting. Michael, you're on City News. Good morning, Michael.
How you doing, Rob?
I'm good, sir. It's nice to hear from you. How are things in my own backyard on Cape Breton Island this morning?
Yes, very frustrating.
Very frustrating. Okay. You're going to be in an election soon, I understand, down there.
Oh, yeah, another election. The promises are coming.
Oh, they're coming. Yeah, one of them is $10 a day child care.
Name is falling from heaven.
Yes, one of them is $10 a day child care. Mr. Rankin, I guess, was making that announcement the other day with Mr. Trudeau, but is it a good idea to do that? What do you think?
Don't judge them by what they say. Judge them by what they do. And their track record dates back, as far as I can remember, is say it but not do it. So don't put no faith in it. But I'm all for child care being paid for.
All right. Okay. Should the wealthy pay more tax?
Pardon?
Should the wealthy pay more tax?
Oh, sure they should. When you see 3 billionaires up like Fireball XL5 trying to get into space, spending billions of dollars, and people all over the world starving to death, and people can't even get their first needles, and you got those fools up there trying to get in outer space, they should put them all on one of those rockets and shoot them into outer space and leave them there.
Okay. What about buying new fighter jets? Should we buy new fighters?
Listen, Rob, the days of being mercenaries to protect the wealthy and their holdings got to end. No, we don't need.
Don't need fighter jets. Okay.
They're outdated. They got drones now. They got other stuff they can go. And besides, we're controlled from international United States and big corporations, so we don't need to protect nothing. They got to end
All right.
the mercenary.
Gotcha. Thank you. Don't you love the Cape Breton accent? I used to talk like that. If I was home for maybe a week, I would come back talking like that.
Oh, I'd like to hear that. That'd be a fun radio.
Look, on the wealth taxes, David, I looked this up. They have people who watch a lot of sports junkies. They actually have tax calculators, like how much would a professional athlete make depending on what team they played for. So I looked it up this morning. Thomas Chabot. I use Thomas Chabot because he's the highest paid player for the Ottawa Senators. Okay? His salary is $8 million a year. According to the Gavin NHL tax calculator, now look, I don't have any insight into Thomas Chabot's tax planning or what strategies he has in place or whatever, right? But let's assume, David, that Thomas Chabot, he's just like you and me, and what happens is he gets his T4 at the end of the year, and he does his net file and does his tax return just like you and me.
Sure, yeah.
Right?
Just a regular guy.
Yeah, like he goes to H&R Block, and this is how it works.
Pros are just like us.
Yeah. He is supposed to pay, in Canada, in Ontario, more than half of that $8 million is gone right off the top in tax.
Oh, yeah.
53% effective tax rate. He would pay annually $4.2 million a year just in income tax.
Just in income tax. And we thank you for your service.
Right. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
The rich are ripping us off. If Thomas Chabot played for the Dallas Stars in the state of Texas, his effective tax rate would be 36%. He would still pay $2.9 million in tax, but his income tax bill would be reduced by $1.3 million a year.
$1.3 million a year.
Yeah.
Every year.
Less a year, right? But his salary of $8 million, right off the top, $4.2 million of it is gone in income tax.
So wonder why any of the guys play in Ottawa.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, exactly.
Thank you for staying.
Right.
Yeah.
Now he has an army of accountants at work, and all they do is figure out ways to reduce that number. I have no idea. I just find that interesting. The rich don't pay their fair share. The guy's paying $4.2 million a year just in income tax, the way things are. Pete in Ottawa. Pete.
Hey, how are you, Rob?
I'm good, Pete. How are you?
Not bad. Love your show, by the way.
Thank you. Okay, $10 a day childcare. Is that the right thing or the wrong thing? Government-run childcare at $10 a day.
I think it's the right thing, but I have friends over in Quebec who have the $7 one, and you get what you pay for, I think.
You get what you pay for. Okay.
Yeah,
long wait time too to get in. If you have to be able to get a space, right? So, yeah. I think the wait time's 5 years. They say when you're pregnant, put your name on the list.
Yeah, I mean, I did it with my kids. We had to do it ourselves. My wife had to quit her job to stay home, and you're pinching pennies. But
okay, yeah, okay. Should the wealthy pay more tax?
I don't know if they should pay more tax, but maybe bring in something that they have to donate a certain percentage of their wealth.
Okay, do good works. Like maybe two callers have already mentioned if you if you do some good work in the community, maybe you get a credit or something like that.
Sure, something
whatever.
like that. We're sitting here living on $100,000 a year, but me and my wife, and he's making $4 million after tax. I mean, come on. They've earned it, I guess, but they should have to give a certain percentage.
Okay, all right. There has long been a plan, for a long time, to buy new fighter jets. Should we continue with the plan to buy fighter jets for the Royal Canadian Air Force?
I think so.
Okay.
We certainly need new helicopters.
Yeah, helicopters.
People have died in these ancient helicopters we own, but no, I think we should, at least have a couple of them anyway.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Pete.
Bye.
Yep. Bye-bye. Up next, 3 election questions is Bill in the South End. Bill. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, nice to hear from you. $10 a day, government-run childcare. Is that a good idea?
Devil's in the details, eh?
Devil's in the details.
Yeah, I think that they would just use it as a school for propaganda to inculcate those children to vote for the NDP or the Liberals, and I worry about things like that. And also the cost. You have to look at what the government's going to have to pay to do that. And I think that depends.
Well, the analysis from some of the think tanks in Quebec, the more right-of-center think tanks, have said it's not, in Quebec, for example, it was never $7 a day childcare. It was more like $70 a day childcare, right? So maybe the parent's paying $7 a day out of their own pocket. The rest is just coming off their paycheck every couple of weeks in tax.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It might be hidden, but it's there.
It's there. Good point, sir. Good point. Yeah. Okay. Should the wealthy pay more tax?
No, I disagree with that because I think all taxation should be done on an equitable basis, and they should pay their fair share as the same as anyone else. But it should be equitable, and when you're taxing wealth like that, you're taxing prosperity. And anybody who does well and prospers in their life will find the government taking it away from them.
Okay, all right. New fighter jets. Should we buy new fighter jets?
Yes, it depends on if the military thinks it's necessary. Then yes, I think we should, because even if we never have to use them, they should know how to fly them.
Absolutely. Good point, sir. Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Be right back. Final quarter. Rob Snow Show. 3 election questions on this Thursday morning on City News.
We just took over this business about a few weeks prior to the pandemic, but we've been loving the community, the people, very friendly. But it's been very difficult starting up a new business, just the time that we did, but I'm sure it's the same everywhere. We did take a broken business, which doesn't help us, but we thought we believe in what we do. We're very passionate about food, and we just really wanted to share the Iraqi culture through our food. All our recipes are homemade, so this is very unique. Usually you hear restaurants, shops, it's all frozen food or prepared food. So nothing here is prepared, everything is homemade. We get our meat and produce from a local farm. So supporting local is the way to go. We are supporting all the way. And our meat are actually marinated the day of, so it's as fresh as can be. Quality ingredients, and everything is made from scratch. I get a lot of people when they come in, they say it tastes like Middle Eastern, like back home. So for you to have been to Iraq and have the food there, you can really compare and see the similarity. We do like to focus on healthy. So our recipes, not only the homemade, again, everything is from scratch, but we have from combos and to small sandwiches. One of our favorites and very popular is the chicken salad and the beef salad. So now you're getting all the protein and all these amazing ingredients that we all need. During this time, I find a lot of people are sitting at home and not enough movement. So to come here and get something healthy other than go elsewhere and just put, what's not so good for our bodies, makes a huge difference. So we have shawarma sandwiches, combos. I mean, if you're looking for a meal to feed your family, I would highly recommend the family platter. It comes literally with everything, with potatoes, with rice, with chicken, with beef. And we don't charge extra for mix. I know a lot of places do. Here we just add everything to your platter. And lots of healthy choices for sure. We're very passionate about food, and for our small family business, it's been good. Like I said, it's a little struggle, but we are not a chained restaurant.
Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
3 election questions. $10 a day childcare. Right thing, wrong thing to do. The wealthy pay more tax than they do now. Should we cancel plans to buy a new fleet of fighter jets? This is in The Citizen this morning. More than 100 authors, academics, and celebrities are urging Prime Minister Trudeau to scrap his plans to spend billions on new fighter jets, which they say are useless in protecting Canada from security threats such as pandemics and natural disasters. The letter was signed by authors Michael Ondaatje, Yan Martel, he wrote Life of Pi, musicians Neil Young, Pink Floyd co-founder Roger Waters, Sarah Harmer, Tegan and Sarah, former diplomat Stephen Lewis, actress Daryl Hannah, okay, environmentalists David Suzuki and Naomi Klein. So you get the idea. Make love, not war. Make love, not war. My gosh. They've made a real mess of this. They really have. They said, well, we're not going to buy the F-35. Back to the drawing board. Instead, we bought used AF-18s, exact same aircraft as the CF-18s that we have now. We bought AF-18s from the Australian Air Force, okay? How old are they? Hall & Oates was ripping up the top 40, okay, when these aircraft were brand new. And the plan is we're going to fly them until the year 2032. We have to try and keep them in the air for 50 years. They were supposed to fly for 20. We'll fly them for 50. Look, I know that cars are not planes, but seriously, can you imagine driving a car on a daily basis that was built in 1982? Okay? The best-selling car in Canada in 1982 was a 68 horsepower Ford Escort. Okay. Ford Escort. China and Russia could flatten the CN Tower before we could get a plane in the air the way things are right now. Still no new jet fighter in sight. But Daryl Hannah says don't buy them. And she's married to Neil Young. So do you want them making policy at DND? Mike in Stittsville. Mike.
Wow, David Suzuki, talking about a guy whose bank account should be checked into. Anyway.
Right, okay. We'll start with the fighter jets there.
Yeah, well, you sort of had a good segue. I mean, if you want, we can start with question 3, or we can start at the top, I guess. But,
all right. Fighter jets.
Fighter jets. Okay, so absolutely. I won't get into you did a good job, I think, maybe even stealing a bit of my thunder. I wouldn't to get into the real details of why we should. But as a friend to many who both fly and maintain the CF-18, I would absolutely say yes. We've waited too long, and as a lot of people don't know, the cost to buy the F-35 has been steadily dropping each time another country signs on to buy them. I think that's with Switzerland, who most recently signed a contract for purchase. So most of these voices, the Suzukis, the Tegan and Sarahs, and so on and so forth, who oppose the contract, wouldn't probably send their kids to school in a 10-year-old car, but they'll let my friends defend our nation in a 40-year-old fighter jet. Seems fair, right?
Yeah.
So, anyway,
what a great point, Mike. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go with wealth taxes. Should the wealthy pay more tax?
I'm going to echo previous callers. I think closing a lot of the loopholes, nailing down money that's hidden offshore. God knows there's probably lots of it. Tax the rich is just a tagline used by socialist governments, I think. I mean, there's maybe some truth to corporate taxes to a point where you don't want to discourage people from setting up shop in your country. But God knows there's lots of ways to go about doing this without saying tax the rich, quote unquote.
Yeah, it's very politically popular because, hey, go ahead and tax the rich. I'm not rich. As long as you're not sticking it to me, what do I care? Okay, $10 a day childcare. What do you think about that idea?
So $10 a day. Everyone else pays the rest in taxes. Kids or no kids, fine. So, listen, as someone whose family finished a few years of childcare just a year or so ago, I can say that there's nothing like making a mortgage payment so you can go off and make the money to make a mortgage payment. So I like the idea of basing it on household income or subsidizing the providers to help lower the cost and like maybe open up more spaces.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Very thoughtful. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. 3 election questions. Let's see how hopefully we can get through everybody here. Ben in Ashton. Ben.
Hi, Rob.
Yeah, hi there. $10 a day child care. Do you think that's the right thing to do, government-run child care, $10 a day?
Well, I think it would benefit the economy for Canadians to have more kids. So if it was a bit more affordable to have kids, that would be a benefit to the economy. I mean, I had a couple of kids for a period of 2 years who were in daycare, and it was $2,600 a month. And we do pretty well, but $2,600 a month is a big pill to swallow.
Oh yeah.
And we get some of it back at the end of the year. But if there was a way where they would subsidize some of it up front, and you get less back at the end of the year, that would be a win.
Okay. Should the wealthy pay more tax?
No, I don't think so. I think they pay enough.
Okay. All right,
I think there's some corporate loopholes that you suggest that we can clean up, and that would help a lot.
Okay. Should we buy new fighter jets?
100% we should. And I think that we can pull some of the funding away from the Army and better fund the Air Force and the Navy. Because at the end of the day, we don't have to worry about the U.S. attacking across our land border, but we do have real challenges over air and sea. And so we need to step up and protect ourselves better in the north and on our coastal waterways.
Right. Thank you, Ben in Ashton. Let's take 2 more here very quickly. Paul in Ottawa. Paul, you're on City News.
Hi. Yes to the daycare.
Okay. Yes.
We need to help families. I'd just like to add quickly to that it'd be nice to try to support families who choose to keep a parent at home.
Okay.
Because there's value to that too.
Sure.
The fighter jets, I'm all for supporting our military. But considering how long these fighter jets, new ones, would have to last, I think we got to start looking, for the service life of those things. And the reality is that the day of the manned interceptor is going to be done before the service. I think we should look at fighter jets that don't have pilots in it, because that's the future, and these will have to last beyond the future of Canada.
Okay.
And paying more tax, absolutely, the wealthy should. We're going to need to tax more, and you can't get it from the poor people. The middle class is already squished. Plus, with that ProPublica publication on how many don't even pay taxes, that's nasty.
Well, that's why the language is important. They're talking about taxing wealth and not income. Right? Big difference. Yeah. Big difference between wealth and income, right? So,
it's just, when you hear about the richest people in the world not paying tax, then there's room to tax them, obviously.
All right, thank you. And this will be the last call for the hour. We're going to whip right through. We only have 90 seconds, so it's like 30 seconds a question, Jeff. Jeff, you're on City News. $10 a day, childcare, government-run childcare. Are you in favor of that or not?
Absolutely. I like that idea for sure. That frees up other income. And Mike from Stittsville there, he answered everything eloquently. So go ahead.
Wealth taxes? Should the wealthy pay more in tax?
Close the loopholes. That's all.
Close the loopholes. Okay. Tighten things up. Okay. And on new fighter jets, what do you think buying new fighter jets?
Take that money and put it into the Navy to put icebreakers up into the north, protect from the Russians trying to claim our land up there now.
Okay. All right, sir. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
Hey, Rob.
Okay. Bye-bye. Yep. Ooh, hot hour again. I like that Thursday thing that we're doing. It's a good one. 3 election questions. A lot of fun. We'll do it next Thursday. Okay. Tomorrow during the Talkback Hour, it's our favorite hour of the week. It's Friday Free-for-All. So that means anything goes, and you come up with the topics, and it's going to be the Friday free-for-all before I go on vacation. So it's extra special, so I want you to think about your topics right now, okay? More on $10 a day childcare. CIBC Economics has done a deep dive into this, and it's basically saying you don't look at it as a social welfare policy. You look at it as an economic policy. It's something that would be good, not just for families, but also good for the economy. Katherine Judge is Director and Senior Economist at CIBC Capital Markets, and she's going to join me right after the news on childcare costs. This is City News.
News in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
This is Thursday, the 15th of July. Good morning, I'm Jason White. Right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, a partly cloudy sky, 25 in Smiths Falls, 26 in Ottawa, the Humidex 33. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. As we head towards Step 3 of Ontario's reopening tomorrow, Ottawa public health officials warn we still need to be vigilant in order to stave off a fourth wave of this pandemic. City News reporter Eric O'Brien has more.
Ottawa's Associate Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Brett Malotny, says what's important to remember as we enter Step 3 is that the Delta variant still poses a risk.
We need to stay ahead of the virus as we go into the fall. We continue to monitor the impact of each step we take, which might give COVID-19 more opportunity to spread. We know the Delta variant is more transmissible and is giving rise to resurgences in other countries despite high levels of immunization. Ottawa Public Health will keep an eye on hospitalizations as a key measure of whether the virus is reaching more vulnerable populations.
Dr. Malotny says we're heading into Step 3 right now because we've been able to keep transmission low, but he says we should take that as a warning from past waves of the pandemic to not let our guard down just yet. Eric O'Brien, City News.
City News time, 11:01. 145 new cases of COVID-19 in Ontario today. 10 more people have died. Out of today's new cases, the province says 3 of those were in Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark counties. 2 were in Ottawa, while 1 was in Renfrew County. The province is reporting 0 new cases in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. Updated local numbers will come this afternoon. There was an increase in testing in Ontario yesterday and with a lower positivity rate. More than 31,000 tests, the positivity rate just 0.05. 2 months since a BC First Nation made international news by reporting the discovery of the remains of 215 children in unmarked graves at a former residential school site in Kamloops. Today, the Tecumloops Secwepemc Band will release a report on the findings of the search, including a briefing on the technology used and an explanation of what it plans to do next. The presentation will be streamed online in about an hour from now, and it will include statements from residential school survivors. The first female commander of the Royal Military College of Canada has no immediate plans for any radical changes as she takes on her new role. She says the college, though, will play a part in changing the military's culture to address sexual misconduct in the ranks. But Commodore Josie Kurtz notes the RMC has also successfully produced generations of military officers for Canada.
So we do a good job of producing not just military leaders, but the people who become also great Canadian leaders in Canadian society. So there isn't a need for radical changes as I can see right now.
Kurtz took over as commandant of the 145-year-old military college in Kingston last week as the Canadian Armed Forces deals with allegations of sexual misconduct involving top officers. Many of those officers graduated from the RMC, prompting questions about the institution's role in creating the conditions for the scandal. Nova Scotia has recorded its first tornado in more than 20 years. The twister ripped through the town of Stewiacke, north of Halifax, a couple of weeks ago. It destroyed a barn and caused some damage to other buildings and trees. The Northern Tornadoes Project investigated the storm and its damage, now confirming the tornado caused EF1 level damage. The last tornado in Nova Scotia was in 1999. Time now for a look at our forecast around here. And here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Showers and thunderstorms in the forecast for us today, but not until after about 4 or 5, and especially through the evening. Our guaranteed high today, 30 degrees, will feel like 37, 19 for the low. For tomorrow, cloudy, showers, isolated thunderstorms, high 27 will feel like 36. For the weekend, cloudy Saturday near 27, feeling like 33, and then we could get some showers Sunday. For today, the high near 30.
Partly cloudy right now, 25 in Smiths Falls. It's 26 in Ottawa. The Humidex is 33. I'm Jason White. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
The case is being made now. And what Canadians really need, Canadian parents, especially given all the difficulties of trying to balance work and childcare duties during the pandemic, what is really needed is a universal, affordable, regulated childcare program. And so you see the Prime Minister, he's out there pitching this to Canadians right now to be cost shared 50-50 between the provinces and the federal government. Now this week, Mr. Trudeau announced the province of Nova Scotia is a willing partner. I'm really not surprised by that at all. Nova Scotia is probably soon to be in an election campaign. The Nova Scotia election will probably happen before the federal campaign. And this is a welcome distraction for Premier Rankin, given his recent disclosures about a DUI conviction. So this was kind of a double election announcement, if you will, one for the Liberal Premier of Nova Scotia and the other for Justin Trudeau. The other curious announcement was the agreement that Mr. Trudeau has come to terms with BC Premier John Horgan on $10 a day childcare. And I say that because John Horgan is a New Democrat. He's a very popular premier, maybe the most popular premier in the country. And if there's a federal election soon, you would think that Mr. Horgan would want to be as helpful as he can be in aiding the fortunes of his federal cousin, Mr. Singh, Jagmeet Singh, the federal NDP leader, because the federal NDP has a lot riding in BC. It's very close there, the race. But there's the NDP premier, and he is all smiley, smiley, buddy with the Liberal Prime Minister, giving Mr. Trudeau a big political win at, you would think, Mr. Singh's expense. Because now Mr. Trudeau, politically, he can say, look, this is not some pie-in-the-sky promise that I'm making. We actually have deals in place with governments already. So it's a major score for the Liberals. And maybe some are thinking Mr. Horgan should have told Mr. Trudeau, look, we have other things on the go right now. We have the pandemic. We have the economic recovery. We have wildfires. We'll get back to you on the childcare stuff. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. After the election, okay? Because I have to help Mr. Singh, but that's not what he did. Anyway, that's the politics of it. Let's get into the economics of it, because it has been explained to me. It has merit. $10 a day childcare has merit, and that you should think about it this way. You look at it not only as a social welfare program. Okay, you have to look at it as well as an economic program, something that would be good for the economy, that it would offer Canadians big savings on childcare, and parents, primarily women, could enter the workforce, pay taxes, contribute to the economy, net benefit economically. That is the case that is also being made. Katherine Judge joins me this morning, Director, Senior Economist at CIBC Capital Markets. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, it's very nice to hear from you. Thank you for taking the time.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
So you've looked at this issue.
Right. So when you look at childcare subsidies examples, such as what we've seen in Quebec, you see very encouraging results in terms of increasing female participation in the workforce. So this recent uptake is very promising. This also could be a crucial force behind driving the economic recovery. In this recession, we have seen women disproportionately impacted. So women were more likely to work in the service industries that were shut down, and women were more likely to take on the responsibilities of remote learning and childcare at home, according to surveys. And we've seen that reflected in the data. Women experienced a larger drop in employment initially during the first wave, and it's been a slower recovery. So this certainly is a crucial part of driving the recovery. And beyond that, it has many positive effects over the longer run in terms of increasing potential GDP. Of course, with these policies, you essentially get a larger tax base. So I'm not just talking about more income tax being brought in, but the economy becomes larger in terms of consumption, et cetera, which ultimately means higher tax revenue through other sources as well. And therefore, the policy can pay for itself.
What has been because the Quebec program has been in place for many, many years now.
Right.
What's been the experience there?
The experience has been that it's shown a very large increase in the participation of women in the workforce. And that's very important because when you have a larger workforce, your economy essentially has more opportunity for growth. And over the longer term, when we're well into the recovery, when we're a few years down the road, interest rates are higher, this is actually a better government policy than, say, an infrastructure spending program program, which would actually crowd out private investment. This actually increases what the economy can produce. So over the longer term, it has many benefits, and in Quebec, it has shown a very notable increase in female participation. So it's very encouraging.
So is it fair to say that if you were to look at GDP growth, for example, it would be a contributor to GDP growth? GDP growth would be stronger. Is that right?
So potential growth would be stronger, and this would certainly be a key part of driving the recovery. So our economy would be bigger in terms of nominal GDP, which translates into a higher tax base and sources of tax revenue growing for the government.
Okay, so let's think about the National Capital Region here where I am, and we have Ottawa here and we have Gatineau there. So on the Gatineau side, and I'm using data from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, which is a very left-wing think tank, but it has compiled the data, and this is the data that I'm using. On the Gatineau side of the Ottawa River, where they have government-subsidized childcare, government-run childcare, the monthly cost is less than $200 a month per child.
Mm-hmm.
In Ottawa, the average is $1,000 a month per child, $1,000 a month. And in Toronto, it's the average, according to this think tank, is $1,700 a month. So, very expensive, right? So this extra let's say Gatineau versus Toronto, this extra $1,500 that could potentially free up. What would happen to that money, do you think?
So ultimately, when, you have a person making the choice to either stay home and take care of their children or go to work, and then you bring in the subsidy, that person is then earning income. There's less uptake of other social benefits. That money is then being spent back into the economy and consumption, different forms of investment, et cetera. So you do get this multiplier impact through different channels, which all ties back into the other revenue sources I was talking about earlier.
Okay. People are going to say, holy smokes, look at where we are. The deficit is somewhere between, $350 and $400 billion. The national debt is $1.3 billion. Lots of worries about inflation and interest rates now, although the central bank wasn't too worried about that yesterday. People are going to wonder, just given the fiscal capacity right now of the government, can Canada afford a social program like this? What would you say?
Right. So first, I want to point out that it's debt service costs that really matter for the deficit. So interest rates are at record low levels, which means debt service costs are very affordable and sustainable as previous debt is rolled over. So that would certainly be something to consider. And as I mentioned earlier, it essentially can pay for itself because not only do you have more people working, therefore a larger income tax base, but then those people are also spending more in terms of consumption. So you have other avenues of revenue. And then, as I said, the longer term impact is to increase the potential growth rate of the economy, which means you have a bigger economy, which ultimately all ties into the policy potentially paying for itself.
Thank you so much for your insight. It's great to hear from you this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, Katherine Judge, Director and Senior Economist at CIBC Capital Markets. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Here at the Thirsty Maiden, we offer a variety of products. So everything from breakfast items, so it's breakfast sandwiches and scones, which have become a staple item here at the cafe. We have an assortment of pastries and cakes and desserts. So we're really big on our dessert bar, which a lot of people come here for. And of course, our delicious coffee beverages. So we do offer not your typical lattes, things like a chocolate banana coconut latte, cinnamon coconut, which is my favorite, and our take on even a pumpkin spice, which we add nutmeg and a dash of cayenne in just to give it a bit of a kick. When you start a business, you don't factor in all the things that could go wrong. You think anything that goes wrong, any failure, is got to be something on your shoulders. You didn't market right, you're carrying the wrong products, you didn't price your items correctly, all the things, right? But when this pandemic began, things going through my brain were I didn't factor in a pandemic. And we were just starting to grow. We were about to blow up, and I think I spent 2 days crying, and then I shut my business down for I think a period of 2 or 3 days. And just being at home during that time, I realized this is not me. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a hard worker. I don't give up, and I'm a go-getter. And I started to think, well, I should probably just start clearing out my freezers and posting and seeing who wants to buy what. And that was sort of how I built my momentum back up. I realized that there's still a large number of people that wanted to support us and were looking for the items that I had to provide. So we started there. Then I reopened literally not even 3 or 4 days after I'd closed my doors, and then started doing curbside pickups and deliveries. Started doing the deliveries myself, free deliveries to the local community, going as far as Bell's Corners and Carp as well. And that's why we're still here. This community has really kept us going a year into the pandemic. We've had a changeover of staff a couple times now, and situations change, and when you can't offer hours for your employees, you don't blame them when they have to go elsewhere. So I think that's also been one of the challenges is recruiting, training, and then they leave, and then bringing in more people and recruiting. And anybody in this industry will tell you that that's something we deal with on a regular basis, whether or not COVID's in the mix or not. But more so now, because every time there's a lockdown, there's a risk of, will we make it through? And then you lay off more staff. And again, their situations and their circumstances change.
The opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So certainly the unofficial election campaign is underway now, and that's why we have events like this one happening right now in London, Ontario. Is Jagmeet Singh, and he's taking some questions from reporters, and it looks just like a campaign stop in London, Ontario. He's taking some reporters' questions on his economic policy.
Even more Canadians couldn't afford to take medication that they need to stay healthy. Even more Canadians lost their dental care coverage. So more than ever, making sure everyone in our country has access to medication when they need it, and making sure people can access dental care when they need it, that is, in fact, become more important than ever. So what we campaigned on in 2019, I'm not surprised, is now actually even more important. And so that's why we are committed to making sure this happens. While the Liberals often talk about one thing, they do things for show and they don't deliver, we believe in getting things done. We, for example, when it comes to pharmacare, the Liberal government, Justin Trudeau, campaigned on pharmacare, brought it up in the throne speech, said it was important to them. And we said, all right, let's get it done. We put forward legislation to actually move it forward, to actually bring about pharmacare for all, medication coverage for all. And when we brought that legislation forward, when the Liberals had a chance to actually do something about it, instead of just talk about it, they voted against pharmacare, clearly showing they're all for show. They're not interested in actually getting the work done. The big difference between us and the Liberals, we're not here for show, we're here to get the work done. In the pandemic, we've shown that. We got more help to more people. And in the recovery, we want to do that. Moving forward, we want to make sure the recovery is focused on what people need and the supports they need so they can move forward.
And this is
Hey, we'll take any other questions that we have.
Jagmeet Singh campaigning.
So a reminder to
even though the campaign's not underway yet, campaigning in London, Ontario.
At the bottom of your screen, if you have a question, we'll just take a moment to see if there are any other further questions.
It does look very much like a campaign stop, but still the questions are coming in via Zoom. It's still a Zoom event.
On Zoom, so we'll go back to the room in case there are questions there.
Does anyone have a question for Mr. Singh? Anybody? Anybody?
I don't think there are any more questions.
Okay, all right. There you go. Okay. I don't know, maybe we tuned into that late, but it's interesting, isn't it, David, to see them all getting ready. Mr. Trudeau is certainly doing his thing. Haven't seen a lot of Mr. O'Toole this week. I don't know where the Conservatives are.
Don't know where he's at.
What they're doing. Okay, 11:21. 11:21. This is the Rob Snow Show here on City News. Professor Elliot Tepper, The World with Professor Tepper, is coming up right after the news. We are going to talk about Haiti. We're going to talk about Cuba. We're going to talk about Afghanistan with the international affairs professor from Carleton. University of Ottawa students, meantime, who are living in residence this fall, will be required to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Let's get some reaction to this morning from Armaan, Kheppar, University of Ottawa Student Union Advocacy Commissioner. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. What do you think about this decision from the University of Ottawa to make it mandatory, basically, that students who are required to live in residence be fully vaccinated? What do you think of that decision?
So over at the Student Union, we've actually encouraged our members to get vaccinated in order to ensure that our return to campus is as safe as possible. And a vast majority of students have actually expressed that they want to return to in-person classes and are tired of online learning. But over at the Union, our priority is to ensure that the safety and well-being of students is paramount.
Sure.
And so we acknowledge that there are some students who can't get vaccinated due to health reasons. And the union's going to, I guess, continue to try to find ways to increase trust and confidence in the vaccine and public health authorities among youth, just because we have noticed that from all the demographics that haven't been getting vaccinated, the youth are one of the largest ones. But this decision has been overall been met with a lot of support from students.
Oh, it has. It's been met with a lot of support? It's been met with a lot of support?
Yeah, so from the information that we have, the majority of students actually have been vaccinated or have expressed that they want to get fully vaccinated. And as per our consultation, students have been largely supportive of this policy, and many are in favor of having really rigorous and high standards of public health to ensure safety on campus.
Okay. But again, you're worried about people who may fall through the cracks, so to speak, or not be in a position to be fully vaccinated. Is that right, Mr. Kheppar?
Exactly. And honestly, the main concern from the union is how this decision will impact international students who have been vaccinated by non-Canada approved vaccines, just because the majority of international students usually choose to stay in residences, and many have been vaccinated or partially vaccinated by vaccines that aren't approved in Canada, such as Sputnik, Sinopharm, or any other vaccine.
I see.
And so this is concerning because there aren't really any clear policies surrounding what to do with international students who have non-Canada approved vaccines. And so that's why the Student Union is calling on the federal government to issue clear and well-evidenced guidelines regarding international students who have been already vaccinated by non-Canada approved vaccines, and to support the suspension on all patents on vaccines, which would help international students get fully vaccinated and safely vaccinated no matter the country they choose to study in.
Okay. That's a very interesting point for international students who have been vaccinated with shots that aren't approved in Canada. Have you taken those questions to administration? And if so, what response have you received?
Yeah, so we actually taken questions along these lines to our administration, and right now they are what they've communicated to us is that they're waiting on guidance from Health Canada and the government itself, just because it is a very tricky situation, and right now there is no scientific data that proves whether it's ethical or safe to force people to get a different dose of a vaccine that they haven't already gotten. And yeah, exactly. So for example, if a student from India or China has gotten Sputnik and then they come here and now the university is asking them to get 2 doses of Pfizer, there's no data to prove that that's safe or ethical in any means.
Yeah. So it sounds like the administration is basically saying it's not up to us. We need to take our guidance from government officials then.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
From the meetings we've had with them, it sounds like one of the main, I guess, details that still needs to be figured out, just because it is a really pertinent detail.
Okay. I thank you so much. Other than this requirement for vaccination, what is the school year going to look like? Is it largely going to be back to normal at the University of Ottawa, Mr. Kheppar? What's your sense of things, how things are shaping up here with a few months to go?
So the university's actually taken quite an ambitious plan to return to campus. A lot of courses are being offered in person or in hybrid formats, whether it be bimodal or one, like for example, one lecture is online and one is on in person. And right now the estimate is that we're going to be having 18,000 students that are going to be returning to campus activities, which is an extremely large step, because last year we had approximately only 4,000 students coming in and out of campus, just because there were some essential like labs or really small groups of students who would be going to campus. But the jump it's quite considerable to 18,000.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We'll have to check in as we get closer to orientation week. Thank you again for your time this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yep. Armaan Kheppar is the University of Ottawa Student Union Advocacy Commissioner. When we come back, Professor Elliot Tepper. The World with Elliot Tepper, Carleton University International Affairs Professor. Countries in focus this week include Haiti, Cuba, and Afghanistan. That is coming up right after the 11:30 news. This is The Rob Snow Show, and this is City News.
And the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, July 15th. Good morning. I'm Alex Gouge. Right now in Ottawa, it's 27 and mostly cloudy, feeling like 34. And in Smiths Falls, it's 25, feeling like 33. Here's what's making news this hour. Ontario health officials are reporting 143 new cases of COVID-19 today, along with 10 additional deaths. This includes 2 new cases in Ottawa, 3 in Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark, and 1 in Renfrew County. The province is not reporting any new cases in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit today. The positivity rate is at 0.5%, while over 31,000 tests were conducted. Updated local numbers will come later this afternoon. Ontario has removed language about racism and colonialism from text accompanying its math curriculum. It's used to say that math has been used to, quote, normalize racism and marginalization of non-Eurocentric mathematical knowledge. That section has been removed from the preamble to the curriculum as have mentions of anti-racist and anti-oppressive teaching and learning opportunities and the colonial context of present-day mathematics education. The government would not confirm when the changes were made, but they appear to have followed the publication of recent media reports that highlighted the sections. A man is now under arrest after a gunpoint carjacking in Smiths Falls that led police on a high-speed chase through Ottawa and into Gatineau. A driver had pulled over to check his phone around 2 yesterday morning at Beckwith and William Streets in Smiths Falls. A man with a gun hopped in the passenger seat and the driver fled. The suspect is now in the custody of Lanark OPP. City News Time, 11:31. I'm Alex Gouge. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It is time for The World with Professor Elliot Tepper from Carleton University. And it's great to hear from you again this morning, Professor. Much to discuss. Thank you for taking the time.
Always good to be with you, Rob.
So let's talk about Haiti. It's very much in the news with the assassination of the country's president recently. Haiti is Canada's largest recipient of foreign aid. The Canadian government has spent $1.5 billion in that country in 10 years. There's a large Haitian-Canadian population, between 150 and 170,000 people of Haitian descent in Canada. Despite $1.5 billion in Canadian foreign aid, the New York Times recently reported $13 billion in all in the last decade, reported that in recent days. It remains the poorest country in the Americas, and it appears to be falling apart, quite frankly. Institutions that are failing and people that are just not doing well by any measure. What can Canada do to help the Haitian people, not necessarily the government, but the people?
Excellent question, Rob. The situation indeed is dire once again in Haiti. It's not the first time. Haiti has had a long-term governance deficit going back right to the beginning of the country. In terms of the answer to your question, the government of Canada has immediately, on the 7th, said, we stand with the people there. We will do whatever is necessary. I could have the exact quote here someplace. But Canada stands with the people of Haiti during difficult times, et cetera, long-standing, deep commitment. We are ready to offer any assistance it needs. And Canadians in need of an emergency consular assistance in Haiti, which is a service, should call the embassy. The embassy then promptly closed because of the situation. But I assume it's back over. Well, the 3 short answers to your question is providing immediate humanitarian assistance. There's clearly a need for dealing with the urgent situation of COVID, among other things, and a government which is failing its people. Local Canadian Haitians have said, well, one thing you can do is to speed up family reunification. We want to bring our people here. They're in need, they're in danger, and there's roadblocks. Let's speed up the process. Longer term, Canada, I think, needs to refocus its aid assistance, and remember, it is substantial, as you pointed out, to really do 2 things: improve the governance structure to the degree possible, and we have a long history of capacity building in governance, and also to strengthen civil society. The resilience of the Haitian people is what has kept the country going, and what is and those people are paying a very steep cost right now.
What is our record in terms of foreign aid? It's always very political, foreign aid. Some people think, well, we shouldn't spend anything on foreign aid. But we have a long history of contributing internationally. part of the Canadian tradition. But what is our record when it comes to tying, say, foreign aid allowances to governance reforms? Okay, we are willing to provide X amount of dollars, but in return, we want to see some progress on this in terms of democratic reform or human rights reform. These sorts of things, Professor.
Yes, there's a long-standing debate about tied aid versus untied aid, and a lot of aid actually comes back to the recipient country. So that, yes, we will give you aid, but you have to end up buying products and services from us in order to carry it out. And then there's a long-standing debate saying, well, that's the wrong way to give aid. It's not really aid then to them, it's an aid to us. This is not just Canada. This is a debate within the field. And then others saying, well, we have to untie aid. And then the counter does, if you untie the aid, then our desired goals aren't achieved. So it's an ongoing debate. The situation in Haiti is of particular significance because of the magnitude of need. The earthquake in 2010 killed 100,000 to 300,000. The country is recurrently in crisis from Mother Nature through hurricanes and earthquakes. And then, as to going back to Haiti, the situation of its governance deficit, which really goes back a very long way. The founding father of the country, very early republic, one of the earliest in the region, 1805, I think, was immediately assassinated. So in addition to the debate about aid, I think one of the other debates is it's what I call the Tepper wrong foot theory of governance. If you set a country on the path of independence and its own and governing itself, and they get off on the wrong foot, it's very, very hard to get back on the right track. And that's certainly been the case for Haiti. We've, in recent memory, remember the baby Papa Doc Duvalier and the Tonton Macoute and the baby Doc Duvalier. The attempts to bring democratic reforms, repeated elections, then the current leader was put in, and the now assassinated leader was put in order to break that cycle. And it didn't happen. He gathered more power into himself. And the country right now has a situation where, in trying to get governance going, they find themselves with, this was a president-prime minister kind of government. The strong president had appointed a new prime minister the day before his assassination. So now there's two prime ministers vying to become president. So we have to, I think, find a way to intervene with our kind of aid to break that kind of a cycle, the negative cycle of the wrong foot theory, the negative cycle of governance deficit.
Okay, so from Haiti to Cuba, which has seen island-wide protests. I'm reading from the Miami Herald here.
Right.
There's a large, of course, Cuban population in Miami, and there are no fans of the regime in Cuba and never have been. Quote, fueled by a severe economic crisis and widespread scarcities of food, medicine, and basic goods, and a record daily number of COVID cases, Cuban leader Miguel Diaz-Canel, who first reacted to the protest by calling on fellow communists to confront the demonstrators by any means, he and other Cuban officials have called the demonstrators mercenaries and have accused the U.S. government of masterminding and financing the uprising. What do you think is happening here, and what do you think might be ahead for Cuba?
Well, I think what's happening in Cuba, again, a very long story there. What's happening in Cuba is that, and we're coming up to the anniversary now of the July 26th movement, the 26th July movement, which brought Fidel Castro to power. He launched a revolution against a decadent government, a dictatorial government. He was then, after successfully coming to power, joined by the Communist Party of Cuba. It was unclear to start whether he was actually a communist, but he certainly has put in place one of the few remaining Marxist-Leninist governments in the world. So what we are now faced with in this current situation is that the founding father, Fidel Castro, who turned power over to his brother, Raul Castro, in 2013, he became the president. And he said in 2018, I'm resigning. So in 2018, basically the Castro era ended in Cuba. The successor has tried to carry on in the same tradition, but people are now taking to the streets all across the country, and that's one of the significant things. There's really, I think, an effort to say the Castro era is over. We are in the post-Castro era. We want libertad. They're chanting all over we want liberty and freedom is the demand of the people right now. The government is responding by saying, oh, well, we're going to let up on some of the restrictions. But essentially you have an authoritarian regime that's going to probably react in the way all authoritarian regimes have and do, and that's to crack down on dissent, which has worked effectively in the past in Cuba. But it's unclear it's going to work again in these changed circumstances, with COVID also rampaging through the island.
Right. Okay. What do you think is happening right now in the White House with the Biden administration as they look on? Do you think the United States sees opportunity here?
Yes, I think we have to remember that the term Cuban Missile Crisis is seared into the imagination of all political scientists. So this in the world, the closest we've come probably ever to a true nuclear war was over the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is not a small matter for anybody, and the fact that the Russians, the Soviets at that point, were willing to gamble by bringing in the missiles and nuclear-tipped missiles so close to the United States set off that crisis. It's really a dramatic moment in history. So the Cuban and American experiences are intertwined, right, going back to the founding of Cuba as we know it in 1898, when the Spanish-American War accidentally led to America becoming involved not only in the Philippines on one side of the world, but Cuba on the other side of the world. So the American-Cuban experience is deeply intertwined, and of course now with the diaspora, and in particular with Rob, the politically sensitive state of Florida, leading the way. So to answer your question, I suspect Joe Biden doesn't want anything new on his plate. Circumstances, dear boy, what comes out and wells over you when you're not expecting them. This isn't what he has in mind, coming face to face with this long-standing, festering concern about what to do with Cuba, what to do about Cuba. So whether he sees it as an opportunity or not, he certainly will see it as an opportunity to stress America's standing against oppression, against dictators, against communism, standing with the people of Cuba. What actions will be taken by Biden and the Democratic administration remain to be seen.
Okay, there's been some criticism of Mr. Trudeau that he hasn't really said much about what's going on there. I want to remind people, okay? I have the statement in front of me. November 26, 2016, Fidel Castro dies. Right. This is the statement released by the Prime Minister of Canada's office. It is he widely ridiculed at the time. It is with deep sorrow that I learned today of the death of Cuba's longest-serving president, Fidel Castro, a larger-than-life leader who served his people for almost half a century. A legendary revolutionary and orator, Mr. Castro made significant improvements to the education and healthcare of his island nation. While a controversial figure, both Mr. Castro's supporters and detractors recognized his tremendous dedication and love for the Cuban people, who had a deep and lasting affection for El Comandante. Mm-hmm. I know my father was very proud to call him a friend. I had the opportunity to meet Fidel when my father passed away. It was a real honor to meet his three sons and his brother, President Raul Castro, during my recent visit to Cuba. On behalf of all Canadians, Sophie and I offer our deepest condolences to the family. Yeah. My gosh, where do you even begin? Is it fair to say that our Prime Minister has a soft spot for the commies in Cuba. What do you think, Professor?
I think he hasn't said anything remotely like that since the day he made those statements. Let's go back to Cuba. Remember, there was the romance of the revolution. This was not only the Cuban Missile Crisis, but Che Guevara and a lot of people around the world still wear that iconic image of Che, who was sent off to Bolivia sent off by the Castros to die, basically, in a hopeless attempt to create revolution there. There was a revolutionary era, which is, I think, now long past. The idea that the spirit of revolution should be carried on, and the romance of the revolution, I think that has now met the realities of post-communist imposed regime on Cuba that has long ago taken away that kind of romance. And we see it now today with the people, with the real romance now are the people of Cuba standing up for liberty. And I think you will find the Prime Minister now, as he has done, saying, we'll stand with those people, not with the communist regime of Fidel Castro that I once upon a time said those nice things about.
Okay. When we come back, we'll talk about Afghanistan. What happens next for Afghanistan now that the Americans are out of there? This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
This affected us big time because when, you know how we are seasoned. We have clothes for the spring, clothes for the winter. That time, lots of clothes didn't arrive on time from Europe or from here because some factory shut down. So, and this put us in an odd position. We received not all the merchandise, part of the merchandise. And people, and for us, we have to be careful, you know, especially with the virus going on. Like, did affect the business, of course, like everybody else. We're not immune, and since the government helped, you know, this did a little bit good for us too, but still affected all the sectors, especially clothing. You know, you can see big corporation affected bad because nobody was thought it's gonna be like this. You know, earthquake might happen, we joke about it before, things might happen, but this was like a third war, but with a virus. So how to survive, that's the question, and we're doing our best to work with the mall, especially rent in a mall is very high. The government, they have certain, let's say, condition, like how many people will be in the mall or in the stores, etc. Yeah, it's a big factor, but of course, if my store has a back doors, or just will be better, it will be much better. At least we can have curbside much easy, because we have to shut down completely, you know. And this left a mark on us, on everybody too. People always ask me, go online. Certain things you can't go online. Let's say T-shirt, certain product people don't know how to fit, but when it comes to clothing, like it's different completely. Let's say I have a customer comes, you can give him 44, but certain suit he might take 42, certain suit he might take 46. So, and how could, I mean, suit is not gonna fit the same. And I see people come back and they show me what they got online and not the same fabric. Mostly young people, but if you really wanna shop, you have to go to the store because everything will be around you. You wanna be sure the color look good, the fit will look good, especially when you spend, doesn't matter how much money, 300 or 2,000, you know? You have to try, you have to see what's going on. Please don't be shy, contact us. It will be a pleasure for me to take a suit or coat or anything. Like sometimes people have a funeral, they have things, they have a wedding, they don't want to come to the mall. If I get all the information, I will go and meet them at their home or their business offices. I'm gonna start doing that, you know, and this will help the business and help the people. Like they're afraid to come to the mall for time being, or they're too busy at work. They cannot go anywhere at certain times, so I'm glad to do that.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So we're back with part two of The World with Professor Elliot Tepper from Carleton University. Let's talk about Afghanistan, Professor. The U.S. military has withdrawn its troops from Afghanistan, but Afghans who have worked for foreign governments are very afraid about Taliban reprisals. They fear for their lives. Former drivers for Canadian officials and embassy staff told the Globe and Mail this week that they are not safe. Prime Minister Trudeau has pledged to help them settle in Canada. What should happen to the Afghans who helped Canadians in Afghanistan?
Well, that's the initial question most immediately on our plate over what's happening in Afghanistan, which is a much bigger story. Canada has been involved with Afghanistan in a very direct and costly way since the overthrow of their king, and we'll go into all that perhaps. But what should happen to them now is what Canada has said we're going to do. Canada has already taken in, well, let's be clear on this, Canada was directly involved after 9/11 in going into Afghanistan with military force, and for which we paid a considerable price. But we've been out since 2014, and since then, the government has been taking in people that has worked with us, and I think 800 have been taken in, and now the pressure is on to say, come on, you've got to take in more. You have to do more, and you have to do it more quickly. The U.S. is under the same pressure, and of course they have substantially larger numbers, so they are taking people out of Afghanistan. We aren't sure which ones and how many, but they're not letting them into the U.S. They're putting them in a third country someplace while they vet through the normal procedures can they come into the U.S. or not. In Canada's case, the government has said, we've already done a lot, we plan to do more, but meanwhile, there's the emergency refugee track open, which is always there for all refugees. So there's more than one way Canada hopes to respond to this, but I hope that the pressure remains on the government to not throw the people that we worked with under the bus.
Through something like a typical or traditional, I should say, convention refugee and through that
Correct.
System. And okay, all right.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. What fate awaits Afghanistan? Is this going to become a Taliban-ruled country again?
Let's take a step into, how did we get into this situation? What is the context here? The context here is that Afghanistan has been a buffer state between very high pressure zones between what we call the Middle East and South Asia and Central Asia, which was at one point Soviet Central Asia. And in colonial imperial times, the great game was played out through Afghanistan. And Afghanistan has always been the graveyard of empire. Alexander the Great tried to go into South Asia through there, didn't make it. The British, at the peak of British imperial power, Rob, when they were really, ruling the world in so many ways, tried through 3 Afghan wars to conquer Afghanistan and lost each time. So it's the graveyard of empire, or what I've sometimes called it, the graveyard of hubris. You think you can go into this backward place and win, and you can't. So what's happened is that this was a mountain kingdom, decentralized, ruled by a traditional monarchy in a very Afghan fashion with a lot of local powers, but some centralization to the monarchy. All that ended in 1973 when the monarch was overthrown, and then a Marxist-type government, increasingly several over a period of time, took power. They kept losing. Then the Soviets on Christmas Eve, 1979, invaded massively, and they quickly took over the country. But 10 years later, they limped out. It's said that probably helped end the Soviet Union, their defeat there. So the place has been in turmoil at least since 1973. The idea that when the U.S. pulls out, the war is over, that's not the case. The war will now continue, and we'll have to see, and we'll talk more about it if you wish, about what the Taliban are up to and who they are.
Okay, well, we have about 2.5 minutes here. So I guess what I want to know is the reason the Americans ended up there, the reason Canada ended up there, and a considerable loss of blood and treasure for Canada is because of the attacks of September 11th, and Afghanistan was a safe haven could it become a safe haven again for groups like Al-Qaeda, for example?
Yes, very definitely so. The reason we're into our current situation is precisely 9/11. Canada went in then, lost 158 people, 1,000 wounded, and a Canadian journalist, etc. So we have indeed paid with our highway of heroes. We all have memories of these things. The Taliban were defeated and they were ejected by a coalition of forces put together by the U.S. And then the U.S. under Bush said, never mind, I'm going to go off to Iraq now. They took their eye off the ball. So the Taliban melted away, but they did not disappear. They are on a rampage. It's not certain they will conquer the country again. It's certainly a possibility. They're being very systematic about it. They're taking over some of the best weapons in the world, as Biden pointed out. The Taliban are now inheriting them. There's a possibility they will indeed overrun the country, but the country has a long history of warlordism and local ethnic groups and local militias fighting to preserve their turf. That's how the Taliban first came to power. Pakistan said, hey, look at all that chaos. We're going to send in these heroes. They will bring peace, which they did, but they brought, as we know, Taliban rule with its ferocity. No, it's not at all clear they'll take over, but they might. And indeed, they're now on a peace offensive of sorts, going to the neighbors, went to Russia, saying, you don't have to worry. This is critical. We will not let the IS, we will not let the Islamic State threaten your stability. We're not going to let Afghanistan be a threat of terrorism coming out of Afghanistan. But they didn't say anything about Al-Qaeda, and Al-Qaeda could indeed be re-entrenched. The Islamic State in a vacuum could come back. So the immediate future for Afghanistan is Canada has invested very heavily, as has NATO, and the U.S. in particular, but all of NATO has invested in creating some democratic space over the last, since 9/11 and since the ejection of the Taliban. Is that all going to now go for naught? And that's the question up in the air right now.
Thank you so much for your insight this week. Great stuff. Real learning experience. Thank you again, Professor.
Oh, you're very welcome, Rob. Always a pleasure talking to you.
That's The World with Professor Elliot Tepper from Carleton University. The Sam LaPrade Show after the news on City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
Tune in weekdays starting at 9 on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV.